Chapter 11:20. Okay, stop quarreling. Zhao Shiran's face darkened and she scolded her. She was also preoccupied at this time and really didn't have the mood to care about her sister's affairs. When Zhao Shiqiong told her about it shyly, she felt like she was joking. Was Prince Chen so easy to fall in love with someone? She had also seen Prince Chen. Prince Chen was indeed extremely handsome, but there was no other woman in his eyes. Prince Chen, who seemed to be as gentle as jade, didn't show any emotion in his eyes. No matter who he was facing, he seemed to be like this. Only when he saw Xiao Wanru, there was a trace of gentleness at the bottom of his eyes. Such a man was heartless. When they arrived at Prince Chen's mansion, Zhao Shiran warned Zhao Shiqiong that Zhao Shiqiong used Minister Zhao to suppress her, saying that it was her father's idea. Now Prince Chen's mansion might prosper, so she should give Prince Chen a good impression before others reacted. What Zhao Shiqiong didn't tell Zhao Shiran was that Minister Zhao felt that Zhao Shiqiong's temperament was similar to that of Princess Chen. They were both the kind of women who looked cold but a little charming. This was what Minister Zhao's wife said. If Prince Chen really liked this kind of woman, her daughter would also like this. Originally, she just listened to Minister Zhao's words and felt that it was okay to have a look. If she didn't like Prince Chen, she would refuse. She was also the daughter of the minister's mansion's legal wife, so why should she be a concubine? But she didn't expect that she would fall in love at first sight. Seeing that Zhao Shiran was angry, Zhao Shiqiong lowered her head and ignored Zhao Shiran and Xiao Caihuan, but her heart was still burning. Her father said that Prince Chen liked her appearance. In fact, not only Prince Chen, but many men liked her like this, so she still had a lot of opportunities. Now that Prince Chen had spread his wings, it was impossible for Princess Chen to be the only female master in the backyard of Prince Chen's mansion. Her father was behind her, and with her identity, she was willing to be a concubine. Naturally, it would be a matter of time. Moreover, she was good-looking. Although she couldn't compare with Princess Chen, there was one thing that Princess Chen couldn't compare with her. Princess Chen was younger than her. It was said that she hadn't reached the marriageable age and was a little immature, but she was different. During the draft, Zhao Shiqiong did not intend to attend it, so she deliberately reported her illness. Now she regretted it very much. If she had attended the draft at that time, Zhao Shiqiong would not have had a chance. She was the first one. Her father had taken a fancy to Prince Chen, but she didn't want to. At the moment, she could only obey her father's order and enter Prince Chen's mansion to be the concubine. The future would be dealt with later. Compared with Prince Chen, she had the support of her father's minister's mansion. It was very likely that she would laugh in the end. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart, he became more and more excited. Since his sister didn't want to help him, he would go back and look for his father. His father had his own thoughts. The three people in the carriage quieted down again. They each had their own plans and did not disturb each other. After arriving at Marquis Xing's mansion, Zhao Shiqiong got off the carriage and directly got into her own carriage. She turned around and headed for the minister's mansion, not wanting to stay in Marquis Xing's mansion for a moment. Xiao Caihuan went to the third branch to reply to third madam. Zhao Shiran stood still and watched his sister-in-law and younger sister leave. He frowned and had a bad feeling. No matter if it was his sister-in-law or younger sister, he couldn't control either of them. After thinking for a while, he didn't go back to his courtyard, but went to Xiao Hua and study room. Sha Xiyin. King. Lu. Shi. To say. She. To the study door. At the entrance, she saw two manservants guarding outside. Seeing her coming, one of the manservants immediately went to report. When she walked in front of them, the other manservant had cleverly stepped forward and saluted Zhao Shiran. The one who had just reported the news also said, "First grandmother, first young master invites you in." "What is young master doing?" Zhao Shiran asked casually. "Eldest young master is reading a book," the servant said. Zhao Shiran walked into the study. Behind the desk in the study, Xiao Hua was sitting on the couch. Seeing her coming in, he put down the book in his hand and smiled. I went to see fifth sister. How was it? His leg had not fully recovered, so it was better for him to read while lying down. If he was tired, he could lie down and rest. Zhao Shiran turned to the couch behind the desk and sat down. Looking at Xiao Huan's pale face, he sighed in his heart. There must be. After all, Xiao Huan was her husband. No matter how unwilling she was, Marquis Xing's mansion had declined and was no longer the Duke Xing's mansion it used to be. Infanta Yuan could not take revenge even if she bullied them. Now, even the position of heir of Duke Xing was gone. Fifth younger sister looks pretty good. Get up and meet people. I can see that there shouldn't be a big problem with her. It's not like the rumors outside saying that her life is in danger. Zhao Shiran collected the myriad of thoughts in his heart and replied. The rumors are rumors after all, and they are not very credible. Xiao Huan said gently. He reached out to hold Zhao Shiran's hand and looked at her affectionately. You have been wrong these days. It's all because of my uselessness that you have suffered so much. I don't feel wronged. Zhao Shiran's eyes turned red and she lowered her head. Although she had a lot of plans in her heart, she still felt sad when she thought of the lost child in her belly. Her eyes involuntarily fell on her belly. If nothing had happened at that time, the child should have been pregnant now. After a few months, she could give birth to her own child. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Seeing her eyes fall on her belly, Xiao Huan knew that she thought of the lost child again. He felt more and more pity for her. He pulled her into his arms and patted her gently. It's okay. It will pass. Everything will pass. His father told him what had happened in the past. It was not him who became heir of Duke Xing. But in the end, he still got the title. He gave it up temporarily for a better rise in the future. When the opportunity was ripe, everything would be his. Don't say that. It's not your fault. Today, third sister came with me. She was very surprised. It seemed that she had something to say to fifth sister, but it was not convenient for her to say it in front of me. She just asked fifth sister to come back to the mansion and said that third aunt wanted to see her. Zhao Shiran quickly controlled her emotions. She sat up and pressed the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief to recover some energy. Third aunt wants to see fifth sister. Xiao Huan frowned. He couldn't figure out why third aunt wanted to see Xiao Wanru. Even when Xiao Wanru was in the mansion, the third branch didn't want to see her. Now it was really strange that third aunt suddenly wanted to see Xiao Wanru. He should ask his father to check it later in case the third branch ruined it. It should be like this. Third sister has never appeared in front of others before. This time, she took the initiative to ask to go with us. I felt a little strange at that time. Zhao Shiran nodded and said. Xiao Caihuan was very low-key now, more low-key than before. It was said that the third branch was helping her to find a blind date. He didn't know whether her face had recovered. Since she came out of the imperial palace, she had been wearing a veil. But it had been a long time. Could it be that she hadn't recovered? Pay more attention to the third branch. Third aunt used to be quiet, but now. Speaking of this, Xiao Huan said with a trace of sadness on his face. He held Zhao Shiran's hand a little harder and said, at this time, it is possible that third uncle and third aunt have other ideas. With the decline of Marquis Xing's mansion, it was understandable that the third branch had other ideas. But it would be fine as long as it didn't involve Xiao Huan's branch. Xiao Huan didn't care about the affairs of the third branch and was not close to his third uncle. He only thought that his third uncle was not a man who had made progress. Since his father told him some things, his mind had changed dramatically, and he couldn't help paying attention to some things. His father was right. He was indeed careless. Maybe he was not the only one who was careless. Both his mother and sister were careless. Who could expect that a cousin who had just been found would cause so many things to happen to their family? If he had known this would happen, he would have taken action at that time instead of letting his mother and sister play with them and thinking that they could not get out of the control of the backyard of Marquis Xing's mansion. After all, he was careless. He had to pay more attention to the affairs of his own backyard. Xiao Hua's eyes became gloomy unconsciously. But when he found that Zhao Shiran was in front of him, he immediately became gentle again. I will pay attention to third aunt and two sisters. Today, Princess Chen asked me to invite old madam out of Yuhui Nunnery. She said that she would meet Empress Dowager tomorrow and ask for Empress Dowager's forgiveness. Then she asked me to invite old madam. Zhao Shiran nodded and mentioned what had happened today. Xiao Hua, then, who was holding her hand, became stiff. He suddenly raised his head and said involuntarily, "What does she want to do?" Princess Chen said that she didn't know that woman and felt that it was not good to have no elder in the mansion now. So, she wanted to ask Empress Dowager for a favor. I also think it is not appropriate for grandma to stay in Yuhui Nunnery all the time. Others will only think that we are not filial as juniors. Zhao Shiran took the opportunity to say. Xiao Hua's face darkened unhappily. He looked at Zhao Shiran suspiciously and said, "Father has decided on it. Grandma can't stop it. You can just treat it as an elder. Anyway, you don't have a son and only have a daughter. You just need to marry her. At most, you will give her a dowry. It is nothing. You don't need to care about it." Why would I care about this? I'm just afraid that you will care. I originally wanted to persuade you, but grandmother is not here. As a daughter-in-law, it's really difficult for me. Looking at fifth sister, it doesn't seem like she will help you in this matter. Zhao Shiran reacted quickly and said with a little modesty, "I am useless. Maybe my husband will be punished by father." After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua calmed down and said with a smile, "It is indeed difficult for you to deal with it. Let's talk about it after grandma comes back. Grandma is not willing to see the son of Marquis Xing's mansion wandering outside. Father, are you really going to give that woman the identity of a co-wife? If you really do that, you will be laughed at by other mansions, right?" Zhao Shiran frowned. In her opinion, it was very absurd. It was good enough for a concubine to enter the mansion. How could she want to be a co-wife? How could she be so shameless? Who would agree to it? The whole Marquis Xing's mansion would be humiliated together with her. I heard from father that this woman has another identity. We are juniors. Let's wait for grandma and father to make a decision. Xiao Hua then said casually. Zhao Shiran was a little confused. What identity did this woman have that could make others agree with her? Chapter 11:21. Chu Luqian didn't return to Lingyun House, where Xiao Wanru lived, until all the people of Marquis Xing's mansion left. After waving his hand to let them leave, he held Xiao Wanru's slender waist and asked lazily, "If there is another woman like her, just beat her out." The unspoken meaning in his words made Xiao Wanru smile and ask, "Your Highness, did you see her just now?" "Of course I saw her. I can't be blind when such a big person bumps into me," Chu Luqian said lazily. He half held Xiao Wanru in his arms and sat down on the large chair. Looking at her still pale face, he said, "If you don't want to see her, then don't." Chu Luqian had seen how Xiao Wanru entered Marquis Xing's mansion step by step and lived a difficult life in Marquis Xing's mansion. He also knew that she would never like people of Marquis Xing's mansion. Since she didn't like them, he could just ignore them. Xiao Wanru reached out to pull his big hand in front of her. She raised her watery eyes and said with an elegant and charming smile, "I heard from Chu Lu and others that she seems to be a little like me." "Really?" Chu Luqian seemed to think for a while with interest and then said with a smile, "Do I look like her?" "No, not at all. My Zhuozhuo is unique. How can she look like me?" Xiao Wanru seemed to feel a sweetness in her heart and couldn't hide the smile on her face. "What? Are you jealous?" Chu Luqian raised his eyebrows and felt that the woman was not useless. He thought to himself that if there were always such a woman bumping into him in the future, would he be able to feel Zhuozhuo's care more? In fact, it was not impossible. He raised his handsome eyebrows and smiled with a bit of evil charm. Your Highness, do you think it's interesting? Xiao Wanru asked with a faint smile. Her pink face seemed to be smiling, but also a little annoyed. Chu Luchen felt that he couldn't show his interest at this time, so he immediately shook his head and said, no. Since you don't, why are you so happy? Xiao Wanru curled her pink little mouth. The light color made them look very similar. However, even so, Xiao Wanru's cherry lips were still a little pink, which made her look very lovely. Chu Liuchen's gaze involuntarily fell on her cherry lips. On her jade-like face, her watery eyes were slightly raised, and her long eyelashes fluttered twice, as if they were fanning his heart, making his heart itch. His Adam's apple involuntarily moved slightly. He was not a person who followed the rules, and the person in front of him was his beloved, who was going to marry into his family. He lowered his head and pressed his lips against her soft and fragrant lips. Even though it was just a slight contact, he felt his heart surging with excitement. His hands involuntarily tightened, almost embedding the person in his arms into his body. The corners of her lips were no longer satisfied with the taste, and they moved towards her cherry lips. Ah! The low cry of pain woke the two people who were intoxicated. Chu Liuchen's body stiffened, and he immediately loosened his control on Xiao Wanru. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Xiao Wanru gasped hard. Feeling the fresh air in her mouth, her little face was flushed, and a strand of her black hair fell down, which made her look more gentle and beautiful. Her watery eyes were full of Chu Liuchen's figure. His innocence and charm were intertwined, and he was fatally attractive. She, who was panting, made people want to hurt her to the bone. I'm fine. I accidentally bumped into it. Xiao Wanru gasped twice before she felt that she had recovered. She lowered her head and leaned against Chu Liuchen's chest. She was too shy to raise her head. She was also immersed in it just now and accidentally moved her injured arm. In fact, she moved her arm when she was immersed in it, but she was really embarrassed to say it out loud. She just blamed Chu Luchen for bumping into her. Looking at her shy face, Chu Luchen laughed, put his hands down, and gently hugged her to calm down the excitement in his body. His eager eyes gradually calmed down, and then became deeper. He reached out to touch her head and said, I went to see Imperial Grandmother just now. Imperial Grandmother said that she wanted to send the concubine back to the mansion again. She said that I have recovered and don't need to guard you anymore. Xiao Wanru was stunned, and the tenderness on her face disappeared immediately. She reached out to push Chu Luchen away to see his reaction, but the hands holding her slender waist did not loosen. She heard Chu Liuchen's low and clear smile in her ear, don't worry. I said that I'm not interested in those women. Imperial Grandmother also knows that I don't like other women. Then what about the matter in the Imperial Court? Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief, but couldn't help asking. If Chu Luchen wanted to move up, in fact, it was the best way to find a few more women to marry into the backyard. With women as a link, he could better get help. In the past, the reason why Xiao Yanru could win the admiration of Chu Luyue and Chu Liuzhou was, on the one hand, her outstanding appearance, and on the other hand, Marquis Xing's mansion behind her. Although it was she who proposed this, her heart inexplicably tightened. She held the handkerchief in her hand and rubbed it hard. Her head was still leaning against Chu Luchen, and she could hear his strong heartbeat, which almost knocked on her heart, making her feel numb and a little flustered. She involuntarily bit the corner of her mouth for some inexplicable reason, but she knew that at this moment, her attention was all on Chu Luchen, listening carefully to the possible answer he might say. She heard Chu Liuchen's soft laughter. It was very light, but Xiao Wanru could hear that he was happy. Was he very happy? Such a thought inexplicably flashed in her mind. The affairs in the imperial court have nothing to do with you. If you can't even protect your own woman, how can you have anything to do with the affairs in the imperial court? Only those who are not powerful will think of using marriage to deal with this matter. If I have a harem, only zhuozhuo is enough. Chu Liuchen's voice was very elegant, but every word fell into Xiao Wanru's heart. It was as if hot tea had soaked into the cold ground, and the water's surface broke the ice, which was as tender as water. No matter how hard the ice surface was, it would be moist after the ice was broken. Xiao Wanru closed her eyes hard and suppressed the excitement in her heart. She slowly reached out her hand and then decisively hugged Chu Liuchen. Her anxious heart fell to the ground. In fact, she had always been not confident. She was very grateful for this love, but she was not confident. In her last life, she was repeatedly hurt in marriage and was broken off again and again. In the end, she had no choice, but those people did not let her go. She was broken off not only because of her face, but also because of her confidence. When she was in Jiangzhou, she was a little naughty, but in the end, she was so timid that she did not even dare to say a word. It was those people who suppressed her to such an extent. After being reborn, deep in her heart, she always had an inferiority complex and did not dare to ask for too much. She was afraid that if she asked for too much, she would lose too much. At that time, she would not be able to live with herself. Thank you. Tears welled up in her eyes. With the enlightenment of this life and the previous life, the knots in her heart were opened one by one, slowly and firmly for Chu Liuchen. Sensing Xiao Wanru's emotional fluctuations, Chu Liuchen reached out and gently wiped her face. Immediately, he wiped away the salty and wet tears on her face. He was shocked and immediately pulled her out of his arms. He looked at her with gloomy eyes and said, "What's wrong? Did someone mention something in front of you?" "No." Xiao Wanru shook her head with a smile. Tears were still hanging on her face, which was breathtakingly beautiful. Chu Liuchen looked at her quietly, and then kissed her carefully to dry her tears. Then he reached out to hold her in his arms and said, "Don't worry. Such a thing won't happen." Chu Liuchen had never thought about the matter of the harem. So what if there were 3,000 beauties in the harem? There had always been only one person in his heart. Only this person could give him a chance to live, make him willing to live, and be willing to climb that throne in order to better protect her. If it were not for her, what was the point of all this? If she were killed by someone, he would rather stain the earth with blood in exchange for a little time in her reincarnation. Xiao Wanru did not see the domineering and bloodthirsty expression on Chu Liuchen's handsome face at this moment. He had never been a kind person, and he did not intend to be as kind and harmless as he looked on the surface. Being heartless and cold-blooded could not describe him. In fact, he was a person who dared to be the enemy of the world for the sake of one person. He did not care about others. Even if more people's blood was spilled in the sky and covered the ground in front of him, so what? I know, I'm just happy. Xiao Wanru no longer hid her emotions. Although her face was flushed with shame, she still firmly said what was in her heart. Fortunately, she was tightly nestled in Chu Liuchen's chest at this time. Otherwise, she would really be too ashamed to say such words. There was a low laughter in her ears. With the vibration of Lin Liuchen's chest, a bright smile appeared on her face, and her delicate facial features were vivid and beautiful. The princess of the Su country is going to the capital city. Princess Yutao is the marriage envoy, and Princess Yuyan is going to marry Chu Qing, which has nothing to do with our mansion. Next, Chu Luyue and Chu Liuzhou will get married. If Imperial Grandmother wants to take this opportunity to say something, you don't have to care about it. Just blame it on me. Chu Liuchen reminded her. He knew Imperial Grandmother's character. Since she had mentioned it, she would definitely talk to Xiao Wanru. He had to remind her first in case she accidentally agreed to something. Anyway, he had been willful and capricious. He had not taken a fancy to anyone before, and he would not take a fancy to anyone in the future. It was useless for Imperial Grandmother to talk to him. I know. Xiao Wanru said with relief. After thinking for a while, her long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes and said, Nanny Wei is Wei Dehai's aunt. Wei Dehai took a fancy to my butterfly clothing shop and was Nanny Dong's former husband. After abandoning his wife and daughter, he married his current wife. He also has a niece, who is the fiancée of Commandery Prince Qing. She has been living in the Yuhui nunnery for a whole 5 years. Wei Dehai. Chu Luchen thought about it and said, I've already noticed her. Don't worry. Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. This matter was very complicated. She was afraid that Chu Luchen did not notice Wei Dehai. She always felt that although this person did not have a high official position, he was inexplicably related to the overall situation. Chapter 1122. Qianqian update the latest chapter on the Crown Princess's medical skills as soon as possible. I'll go to the palace to see the Empress Dowager tomorrow and ask her to release old madam. Xiao Jing is going to marry a concubine. It's not good to have an elder in the mansion. Xiao Wanru added. The matter of Marquis Xing's mansion was really troublesome. She didn't say it in detail because she didn't intend to trouble Chu Luchen. She did not think that she was useless and could deal with the matters in the backyard. Alright, just be careful. Remember, if you can't solve anything, there's still me. Chu Luchen nodded with tenderness in his heart. The gloominess and bloodthirstiness on his face had long disappeared. He lowered his head slightly and his handsome eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's head. There was a trace of tenderness in his eyes that even he himself could not detect. A gentle breeze blew past the window, lifting up the curtains. A man and a woman were hugging each other tightly. Handsome and stunning, they were as beautiful as a painting. The man lowered his head slightly, looking very gentle. Only when he raised his eyes did one realize that there was a trace of brutality flashing through his ink-black eyes. The woman in his arms was the only thing he wanted in this life. In fact, he was more than willing to help her settle everything himself. However, since she wanted to do it herself, he would let her do as she pleased. No matter how much trouble she caused, he would still be there in the end. Xiao Wanru went to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace the next morning. As soon as she walked out of the side door of Prince Chen's mansion, she met the palace maid named Qingmu, who served concubine Lan. Princess Chen. Qingmu stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Xiao Wanru looked at Qingmu and asked, "What's the matter?" Qingmu politely said, "Our Empress invites Princess to come to the Twin Rest Hall in a moment. Is that okay? Concubine Lan wants to see me at this time." Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. The concubine Lan in front of her was no longer the concubine Lan in the past. Now everyone in the palace knew her. She heard that these past few days, the emperor had been resting in Shuangxi Palace, and because of her, he had punished the people from the imperial kitchen. Regaining his favor, or something else? She had asked Chu Luchen about this before. Chu Luchen said that he was very cold to concubine Lan. It was obvious that he didn't want to mention concubine Lan. His attitude was the same as before. Chu Luchen didn't like concubine Lan very much. If it were the former concubine Lan, Xiao Wanru would not care. But now concubine Lan was in the limelight. If Chu Luchen offended her, she must be careful. Xiao Wanru was worried, so she went to ask Nanny Zheng. Nanny Zheng wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, she said that she couldn't say it and asked her to go to the chief butler. When the chief butler came over, he was very straightforward and said that concubine Lan was Chu Liuchen's biological aunt, but there was a misunderstanding between them, which had not been solved until now, so that Chu Liuchen still didn't like her aunt. Because of this answer, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. At least she could see that concubine Lan had no malice toward Chu Liuchen, which was enough. As for other things, she pretended that she didn't notice anything. Chu Luchen would tell her if he could. Since Chu Luchen didn't like concubine Lan, it was inconvenient for her to have more contact with this concubine Lan, so she refused politely, "I'm not feeling well. I'm afraid I don't have the strength to go to concubine Lan again after coming back from the Palace of Benevolent Peace. Your Highness, please don't waste too much of your time. Her Highness has something important to tell you. Please spare some time, Your Highness. A soft sedan chair will be waiting for you in the Palace of Benevolent Peace." Qingmu pleaded. How dare he let the soft sedan chair wait at the gate of the Palace of Benevolent Peace? Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened. After thinking for a while, she no longer refused and said, "Okay." Qing Mu obviously breathed a sigh of relief and stepped aside. "Your Highness, please." Xiao Wanru nodded and went to the Palace of Benevolent Peace with Yujie. She was much better now. It didn't matter if she walked slowly all the way, but she couldn't be too tired. Although what she said before was an excuse, it was also the truth. After entering the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace, Xiao Wanru turned around the wide screen and saw the Empress Dowager leaning on the bed. She looked listless and sickly with a yellow face. With just a glance, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. Although the Empress Dowager looked sickly, her condition was not too bad. She should just be suffering from a common cold and would recover after a period of rest. "Greetings, Imperial Grandmother." Xiao Wanru stepped forward and was about to kneel down, but was stopped by Nanny Wei beside her. "Don't stand on ceremony. You are not in good health. Why did you come here instead of recuperating in the mansion?" The Empress Dowager rebuked her in a low voice. Nanny Wei knelt down with a thud and said in a sorrowful voice, "Please forgive me, Your Highness. I was misled before, and then I misled Princess Chen with displeasure. I said that the Empress Dowager liked that kind of screen and asked you to wear it. Please forgive me this time. I just want to serve the Empress Dowager wholeheartedly and don't care about other people's affairs anymore." She apologized for the matter of the screen on the birthday banquet. She glanced at the Empress Dowager's face and saw that she looked calm. She should have known it long ago. She smiled slightly, reached out to help Nanny Wei up, and comforted her. "Nanny Wei, you are too polite. I only hope that Nanny Wei will serve Imperial Grandmother well in the future and treat her wholeheartedly. As long as you don't have any other thoughts, the past will naturally be written off." Nanny Wei's heart skipped a beat. She suppressed the panic in her heart, wiped away her tears, and nodded repeatedly. "You are right, Princess Chen. I will remember it. This old servant will never do such a thing again." This old servant regretted it afterwards, but I also thought that nothing would happen. Instead, I made Princess Chen lose face. The screen banquet was neither a big nor a small matter. After all, in the end, everyone thought that Xiao Wanru had been framed. Now this person also took the initiative to stand up and take all the responsibility. If they continued to punish her strictly, it seemed that they would not give face to the Empress Dowager. Moreover, the Empress Dowager was sick now. With a familiar person serving her, she would recover quickly. At this time, they couldn't really deal with Nanny Wei. Xiao Wanru's words at the moment were the most appropriate and kind. Of course, the word disloyal in her words made Empress Dowager feel a little unhappy. She glanced at Nanny Wei and thought secretly, although I still use Nanny Wei and think of Nanny Wei's friendship, I'm sure that Nanny Wei will not be as wholehearted as she used to be. In fact, the Empress Dowager wanted to punish Wei Dahai more. It was Nanny Wei who begged bitterly that she didn't punish Wei Dahai. Nanny Wei repeatedly said that Wei Dahai was the only son of her elder brother. When she was young, it was her elder brother who brought her up. Now he was her elder brother's only child. How could she bear to let him bear the responsibility? The Empress Dowager was also very upset these days, and she was not feeling well. Indeed, she didn't have the energy to deal with Wei Dahai. There were important events everywhere in the imperial court and the imperial harem. Even if she lay in bed, she could hear them clearly, and she knew that at this time, other things could be put aside. In the eyes of the Empress Dowager, Wei Dahai's official rank was really low. She couldn't bear to deal with her. For the sake of Nanny Wei, she spared her. Of course, the Empress Dowager also said that it depended on Xiao Wanru, Prince Chen's opinion. Now Xiao Wanru's words could be regarded as giving face to the Empress Dowager. After all, Nanny Wei had served the Empress Dowager for many years, and the Empress Dowager couldn't bear to see Nanny Wei get hurt because of this kind of thing. Since this matter had been talked about, the Empress Dowager was in a good mood. She asked Xiao Wanru to sit down on the chair beside the bed, looked at Xiao Wanru's delicate little face kindly, and asked with a smile, "Is Prince Chen really well? Is there any big problem these days?" The Empress Dowager still couldn't believe that Chu Luchen was really well and would not almost die because of a little cold. Prince Chen's mansion was almost in the palace and connected to the imperial palace. It could be said that it was the Empress Dowager who raised Chu Luchen little by little. She also worried that she couldn't sleep well again and again, afraid that when she woke up, it would be the news that Prince Chen was critically ill. Now it was all right. She didn't have such worries anymore. The imperial physicians all said that there would be no big problem. "Thank you for your concern, Imperial Grandmother. Prince Chen is fine, but Imperial Grandmother, Prince Chen came back yesterday and told me about your health. He asked you to relax. There is nothing that can't be solved. If you keep your mood good, you can get better faster." Prince Chen said that this was based on his experience. Xiao Wanru comforted the Empress Dowager. This child, he even took this kind of thing as a joke. The Empress Dowager's nose turned sour and she almost cried. This child had struggled on the verge of death many times. Every time he survived, he would comfort her with a smile. Every time she thought of the Empress Dowager, she would feel distressed and cry. Now it was all right. He was finally all right. "Imperial Grandmother, I also told him not to talk nonsense." Prince Chen said it was all right, Xiao Wanru said softly. The Empress Dowager nodded and reminded her worriedly, "Tell him not to be distracted in the future. Be careful not to disturb the Bodhisattva in heaven. When he is free, go to the Buddha hall in the palace to worship the Bodhisattva." Thinking of Chu Liuchen's temper, the Empress Dowager felt that it was more appropriate to entrust it to Xiao Wanru, so she said, "If he doesn't want to go, you can go by yourself and worship the Bodhisattva for him." "Imperial Grandmother, I know." Xiao Wanru agreed obediently. The Empress Dowager was very satisfied. She took the handkerchief handed over by Nanny Wei, wiped her tears, and said with a smile in her eyes, "Well, let's not talk about this. I heard that people from Marquis Xing's mansion came to see you yesterday. What's wrong? Is this the first time they have come to see you?" "Imperial Grandmother, it's not that they didn't come to see me. They were not in good health before and our prince was not here, so we didn't let them come. Now I'm a little better and the prince is back, so they came to see me," Xiao Wanru explained. The Empress Dowager was very satisfied with the feeling that her husband was the most important person in her words. She nodded at once and said, "There are many troubles in your mansion, and you didn't care too much." Marquis Xing's mansion was becoming more and more unreliable. The Empress Dowager was afraid that they would implicate Xiao Wanru. "I do have something to ask of you, Imperial Grandmother." Xiao Wanru knelt down with an embarrassed look. "What did they ask you to ask of me?" Seeing this scene, the Empress Dowager understood and asked with a darkened face. Chapter 1123. He wants to ask Imperial Grandmother to release old Madam. He said. Xiao Wanru was so shy that she couldn't go on and blushed anxiously. "Get up and talk." Empress Dowager snorted. She really didn't like the people of Marquis Xing's mansion now. Nanny Wei came over attentively, helped Xiao Wanru up, and then stood aside and looked at them with a smile, as if there was really no grudge between them before and it was really fine after they talked it over. She seemed to be broad-minded. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment, sat down, and said with her head lowered, "First sister-in-law said that second uncle wanted to marry his former mistress, and it was impossible without an elder in the mansion. In the beginning, second uncle even brought that woman to see his granddaughter-in-law." Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment, sat down, and said with her head lowered, as if she didn't know how to explain this matter. After all, this kind of thing was a matter between the elders. It was really shameful for her, a niece, to talk about this kind of thing. Xiao Jing is getting more and more immature. A mistress from another mistress wants to marry into Marquis Xing's mansion and even came to you to ask for it. What's wrong? Does he need you, Princess Chen, to give him a title as a mistress? Empress Dowager snorted coldly and leaned back. She increasingly felt that she had misjudged Xiao Jing for so many years. She used to think that he was an important person, but now he seemed to be obviously pompous and frivolous. She frowned and suddenly felt that she had missed something. After thinking about it carefully, her face became increasingly gloomy. He still wants to marry her. Even if Madame Jiang is not his wife, she is still his legal wife, Madame of Marquis Xing. Does he want to give up his position to that mistress after becoming a mistress? He really doesn't know what to do. He doesn't mean to give up his position. He just wants that woman to be his co-wife. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and said bluntly. He really dares to say that. I don't know where a mistress from, but she dares to approach Madame of Marquis Xing and even wants you, Princess Chen, to give her face. Xiao Jing is so shameless. Empress Dowager patted the edge of the bed hard and said angrily. Nanny Wei hurriedly said with a smile, Empress Dowager, don't be angry. Marquis Xing's mansion lacks an elder to take charge. Xiao Wanru raised her head and nodded. Imperial Grandmother, please ask old Madam to come back. After all, there is an elder in charge of the backyard who can control second uncle. If it goes on like this, it's hard to tell what will happen. That woman came to the prince's mansion before, but the prince was not there at that time, and I was not in the mood to see her. Xiao Wanru calmly told her that the girl named Anyang had come to Prince Chen's mansion before. No matter what Xiao Jing schemed against her, it was always right to report it to the Empress Dowager first. She had a feeling that it was not that simple. If that woman didn't have someone to rely on, she wouldn't be so bold as to make trouble in front of her door. How could she be sure that she wouldn't punish her? He's rebelling. He really thinks that Prince Chen's mansion is his Marquis Xing's mansion. I'll ask the Emperor to control Marquis Xing's mansion later. The Empress Dowager became more and more angry. Prince Chen was the prince that the Empress Dowager cared about the most, and Xiao Jing was targeting Prince Chen. Ask someone to pick her up later and ask her to manage Marquis Xing's mansion well, so that such things don't happen all the time, the Empress Dowager said angrily. Thank you, Imperial Grandmother. Xiao Wanru thanked her. It has nothing to do with you, and you don't need to interfere in it. Let Marquis Xing's mansion solve it themselves. They can't even deal with a mistress. Xiao Jing, Marquis Xing, had better give up his title as soon as possible. The Empress Dowager looked down on Marquis Xing's mansion more and more. At the same time, she felt lucky. Although Xiao Wanru was a miss of Marquis Xing's mansion, she was not brought up in Marquis Xing's mansion, so she was different from other misses in Marquis Xing's mansion. However, the Empress Dowager felt very sick of Xiao Yenru, who was famous for her beauty, when she saw what Xiao Yenru had done before. Yes, I'll keep it in mind. But I'm afraid that others will think that I've married into Prince Chen's mansion, so I don't even care about my mother's family. After Xiao Wanru agreed, she looked uneasy. As a new daughter-in-law of the royal family, she was young and tender, so she did have these scruples. The Empress Dowager understood and naturally supported her. It's okay. If someone criticizes you with this matter, I will definitely uphold justice for you. Thank you, Imperial Grandmother. Xiao Wanru stood up excitedly and bowed. Nanny Wei looked down at her toes and quietly listened to the Empress Dowager and Xiao Wanru talking with a respectful face. Only she knew that she had underestimated Princess Chen before. Although she was young and married to Prince Chen, she did everything flawlessly. What had happened on the Empress Dowager's birthday and what she said at the moment showed that Princess Chen was not simple. If she wanted to deal with her, she had to be more careful and couldn't rush forward as rashly as before. In the end, she was almost abandoned by the Empress Dowager. If it hadn't been for her friendship with the Empress Dowager through so many years of trials and tribulations, and her pleading, and the Empress Dowager happened to be ill at this time, she would have been unable to get through this time. Thinking of this, Nanny Wei still felt a lingering fear in her heart. She was indeed careless and almost lost everything to her and Dahai. Well, let's put these things aside first. I really have something to tell you. Prince Chen has recovered, and you are a little younger now, but Prince Chen is not young anymore. He should have Sir's son. There is a lot of trouble in the previous court. If he has a son, it will be easier to talk. The Empress Dowager showed a smile on her face, pointed at Xiao Wanru and sat down, and hinted. I'll listen to our prince's orders. With Chu Liuchen's words, Xiao Wanru had already been prepared. She immediately sat down and answered softly. She lowered her head and pinched the handkerchief in her hand with a slightly red face. You are Princess Chen. How can you listen to him on everything? As Princess Chen, you have the final say in the backyard. The Empress Dowager said discontentedly. But, if the prince doesn't agree, I don't dare. Xiao Wanru raised her long eyelashes and blinked twice uneasily, with a little girl's uneasiness. It could be seen that she was really worried. Although His Highness has recovered, he still has to take good care of himself. It's not good to make him angry. Everything goes according to his wishes. If the prince likes someone, I will directly lift the person up without any hesitation. I'm afraid that His Highness won't agree and will blame me. He can even throw the person who was sent in here out, and he may even, speaking of this, Xiao Wanru looked up at the Empress Dowager with uneasiness in her eyes. Her words reminded the Empress Dowager that the few palace maids who had been sent to Prince Chen's mansion before were even killed. The palace maids were even killed. It was okay if they were palace maids before, but now they were really the daughters of noble families. If they were sent in, the result would be the same, which was not what the Empress Dowager wanted. This was not a marriage, but a feud. However, the Empress Dowager could do nothing about her grandson's bad temper, so she wanted to start with Xiao Wanru. Now thinking about it, it was not appropriate. It would be okay if Chen was satisfied. Otherwise, she really didn't know what would happen. The Empress Dowager sighed helplessly and reached out to rub her forehead. This child was not a worry-free child, but compared with those few, she felt that he was much more considerate. The Empress Dowager was really afraid that Chu Liuchen would kill the misses of aristocratic families who were sent into the mansion and throw them out. Well, I got it. I'll ask Prince Chen for his opinion next time. The Empress Dowager's eyes fell on a few scrolls of paintings on the table and said helplessly. Originally, she wanted Xiao Wanru to see some misses of aristocratic families, but now it was not necessary. When Chu Liuchen came again, she must let him see them. She had to choose one or two. At that time, both Prince Yu and Prince Zhou had chosen concubines, but there was no one in Prince Chen's mansion. The most important thing was to consider his health. Now that his health was fine, she had to choose one or two more. It was better to have children for the royal family as soon as possible. Xiao Wanru nodded and was very gentle, as if she did not see the helplessness in the Empress Dowager's eyes. Seeing the fatigue on the Empress Dowager's face, Xiao Wanru also got up and said goodbye. The Empress Dowager did not keep her and asked Nanny Wei to send Xiao Wanru out. Nanny Wei walked Xiao Wanru all the way to the gate of the palace and then stopped. She looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile and a grateful face. Thank you for forgiving me, Princess Chen. It's not a big deal. It's okay. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said indifferently, I heard that Nanny Wei is Lord Wei's biological aunt. It's rare that you can meet each other after losing contact for so many years. It's really lucky. I thought that I was the only one in the world, but I didn't expect that there was still a blood relative alive. Nanny Wei sighed and said. Nanny Wei, do you know why Lord Wei insists on recognizing Nanny Dong? Xiao Wanru asked curiously, now the butterfly clothing shop is mine. If Lord Wei insists on recognizing Nanny Dong, it's not impossible. Let him get Nanny Dong's forgiveness first, and the rest can be discussed. Nanny Wei now knew that the person Wei Dehai let her see that day was not Nanny Dong herself, so she smiled awkwardly and said, yes, I know. He is also eager to recognize his wife and daughter and make up for the mistakes he made when he was young. At that time, it was also an accident that made the mother and daughter suffer. Now it's even more difficult for him to settle this matter. Don't worry, Princess Chen. I will definitely warn him and stop him from using improper means again. A freak accident, a misunderstanding. Since Nanny Wei said so, the Empress Dowager must also agree with it. It sounded that Wei Dahai's purpose was also good. Did he want to recognize his wife and daughter? Even if the Empress Dowager believed it, Xiao Wanru did not believe it. Wei Dahai seemed to be unwilling to give up. That was good. It happened that she had no chance to contact Nanny Dong. It was a good opportunity, but it depended on what Wei Dahai would do next. Mo Chiui was involved in the Yuhui nunnery. Chapter 1124. The palace sedan had stopped outside the palace gate. Xiao Wanru got on the soft sedan and headed for the Shuangxi Palace where concubine Lan was. Along the way, the road became more and more deserted. In the end, there were hardly any palace servants passing by. They finally arrived at the gate of the Shuangxi Palace. Xiao Wanru got off the sedan with the help of Yujie. When she stood still, she frowned and happened to see a familiar figure, who looked like Xiao Yanru. With a trace of gloominess in her watery eyes, Xiao Yanru seemed to have noticed concubine Lan a long time ago. At that time, the people in the palace didn't even know concubine Lan. How did Xiao Yanru find out and feel that concubine Lan was extraordinary? Who is that? Xiao Wanru asked. Qing Mu, who came out to greet them, looked in the direction Xiao Wanru pointed and said with a smile, "It's just a palace servant." There have been many palace servants wandering outside the palace gate these days, but they have all been driven away by the guards. Hearing Qing Mu's words, Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the 4 guards guarding the palace gate. She hesitated for a moment. "Don't worry, Your Highness. Her Highness has already given the order. They won't stop you anymore." Qing Mu explained cleverly. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment and walked in slowly. It seemed that concubine Lan was much more powerful than she had imagined. The 4 guards looked straight ahead and didn't reach out to stop her. Xiao Wanru led Yujie into the Shuangxi Palace, which was in the limelight at present. The layout of the Shuangxi Palace was not gorgeous, and many places could be seen to be old, but it was still very clean. Sitting in the middle of the hall, concubine Lan was dressed in plain clothes as usual. If Xiao Wanru hadn't known her in advance, she might not have been able to guess her identity. She was the most eye-catching concubine Lan at present. After bowing, Xiao Wanru sat down beside concubine Lan as she was told. "Princess Chen, I did ask you to come here today because I have something important to tell you. If I said something wrong, please forgive me for the sake of Prince Chen." Concubine Lan went straight to the point. Her words were very polite, but her meaning was very patient. "Please go ahead, Your Highness." Xiao Wanru nodded. "Invite young Mistress Qianqian out." Concubine Lan smiled and ordered Qing Mu. Greenwood hesitated for a moment, but still entered the inner hall. Soon, he brought a beautiful young woman into the hall. The girl, who was about 17 or 18 years old, was so beautiful that she was not inferior to Xiao Yanru. Xiao Wanru had never seen this girl before. "I pay my respects to Aunt." The woman gracefully stepped forward and bowed. "Come here and greet Princess Chen," concubine Lan said with a gentle smile. "Greetings, Princess Chen." The woman turned around and bowed sideways to Xiao Wanru with watery eyes. Xiao Wanru nodded but did not say anything. She waited quietly for concubine Lan's words with a trace of displeasure flashing across her heart. Both the Empress Dowager and concubine Lan seemed to have a clear goal at the moment. They both wanted to force her to take Xiao Yanru back. Both of them planned to marry Chu Luchen as a concubine. How could she like them? Princess Chen is the niece of my mother's family and also Prince Chen's cousin. When they were young, they played together. Later, my mother's family moved away from the capital city. At that time, they were still reluctant to part with each other. They hugged each other and cried. They had no choice but to separate. So many years have passed. Concubine Lan said with a sigh. Xiao Wanru pinched the handkerchief in her hand gently. She felt a sense of sarcasm in her heart. They talked as if they were lovers who would be separated forever. They were just 2 ignorant children. They said that there was true love between them. It was obviously a prelude. She had respected concubine Lan from the bottom of her heart. Although Chu Luchen disliked her and asked her to stay away from concubine Lan, she was very unhappy at the thought that concubine Lan was her aunt's elder. She has just arrived in the capital city for a few days. In the past 2 days, I asked the emperor for his grace to let her live in Shuangxi Palace temporarily. But it's not appropriate for her to live here all the time. Take her back later and let her live in Prince Chen's mansion for the time being. It's not safe for her to live alone outside. Concubine Lan gave an order with a smile and her eyes fell on Qi Niyan with a gentle look. Xiao Wanru was so angry that she almost laughed. Concubine Lan had no choice but to take Qi Niyan. She forced Qi Niyan to Prince Chen's mansion and made sure that she would enter the palace when Xiao Wanru was afraid that Chu Luchen would refuse. She even picked a soft persimmon. Concubine Lan. I'm afraid I can't. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. Prince Chen is in charge of the affairs in the mansion. He has always been quiet. If I disturb his peace without his consent, I don't dare to do so. Concubine Lan's smile froze on her face. She looked at Xiao Wanru in astonishment and could hardly believe that Xiao Wanru would say such words in front of her. Qi Niyan's face also turned red, and her eyes were watery. But she did not dare to cry out loud. She bit the corner of her lip hard to suppress her grievance. Such a look had already made people feel that she had suffered all kinds of grievances, but she didn't say anything. She was extremely gentle and kind. It was the first time that Xiao Wanru had seen so many grievances on someone else's face. Even if she didn't say a word, she had already made up her mind to accuse her. This woman was not simple. She just wants to live in the most remote corner of your mansion, and she won't disturb you. I'm just afraid that as a girl, she will easily get into trouble outside, and there is no elder around her. Prince Chen is always her cousin. It's not a big deal for her to live for a few days at this time. Concubine Lan finally smiled again, but there was a hint of displeasure in her words, almost as if she was scolding Xiao Wanru. Your Highness, I really can't make the decision on this matter. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. You. Concubine Lan was furious. Aunt, please calm down. Don't be angry. It's Ian's fault if you get sick because of anger. Ian can rent a courtyard outside. You don't have to bother my cousin and cousin-in-law. Qi Niyan took over Concubine Lan's words in a soft voice. She walked behind Concubine Lan, gently patted her back twice, and comforted her. Concubine Lan pursed her lips and stopped talking. After a long time, she said slowly, I know that Prince Chen has a grudge against me, but blood is thicker than water after all. Will I hurt Prince Chen? Her own cousin doesn't have a place to live now. Even if Princess Chen asked the emperor also said so. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that Concubine Lan had come prepared. If the emperor also agreed, she really couldn't refuse. It was useless to push the blame to Chu Luchen. If what Concubine Lan said was true, it was really just a temporary residence. It would be unreasonable if Concubine Lan didn't even give her face. Why did you come to the capital alone, Miss Qin? Xiao Wanru asked softly. She didn't say yes, nor did she say no. Ian, I haven't seen you for a long time. I really miss you. This time, I specially came to the capital to see you. Qi Niyan restrained her previous grievances and even showed a smile on her face. Although it was a little forced, it could be seen that she sincerely showed that she didn't care about Xiao Wanru's words just now. But how could she really not care? Who wouldn't care about being despised in front of her, let alone a young girl? Only such a person was more reassuring. Concubine Lan nodded secretly. She agreed with her niece very much. Of course, she was more partial to her niece. In fact, she had made an engagement with her niece at the very beginning. It was just that many things had changed later, so the matter was left unsettled. Of course, she brought Qi Niyan to the capital this time not only to see her niece, but also because concubine Lan wanted her niece to marry into Prince Chen's mansion. This was very important, especially at such a critical time, so she had to be more careful. After so many years, she also knew Chu Liuchen's character. If she asked him to take Qi Niyan away directly, he would definitely ignore her. So she thought of starting from Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru dared to refuse to her face, which made concubine Lan feel very embarrassed. She really couldn't do anything about Chu Liuchen, but she didn't believe that she couldn't do anything to Xiao Wanru. Princess Chen, if you can stay in Prince Chen's mansion for a while, I will definitely thank you and Princess Chen. Qi Niyan said again and looked at Xiao Wanru with a little desire in her eyes, as if Xiao Wanru would go too far if she still refused. Princess Chen, let Qi Niyan stay in your mansion for a while. If you really don't want to, you can find a place to live in a few days and then move out. Concubine Lan said. Xiao Wanru's eyes flashed, and she already had an idea. The emperor had already agreed. If Chu Liuchen insisted on disagreeing, it would make people feel that he was too heartless. After all, this cousin of hers seemed to be gentle and sensible. Their cousins loved to live in their cousins' mansions the most. However, there were still elders in other mansions, while her cousin was in charge of Prince Chen's mansion. In this case, Miss Qin, just follow me back to the mansion. Xiao Wanru stood up, bowed sideways to concubine Lan, and said goodbye. I sat in Imperial Grandmother's Palace of Benevolent Peace for a while. Now I feel tired, so I want to take Miss Qin back as soon as possible. Please forgive me, concubine Lan. Since Xiao Wanru agreed, concubine Lan showed a smile on her face, nodded gently, and said, in this case, you can go back first. You haven't recovered yet. It's indeed my fault. Qingmu, see Princess Chen out. This niece-in-law seemed to be in good health at the moment. In fact, she had other plans, but she couldn't tell Princess Chen. After all, Princess Chen was still young, so concubine Lan didn't trust her very much. It was better not to say what to say and what to do, so as to avoid unnecessary trouble. There were more people in the palace. What could be more reassuring than letting her niece enter Prince Chen's mansion? Concubine Lan thought so she asked someone to see Xiao Wanru out of the door with a smile on her face. When Xiao Wanru came here, there were only two of them. When she came back, she brought another pair of master and servant with her. After entering Prince Chen's mansion through the side door, Qi Niyan, who had been following her in silence, suddenly uttered a heavy ouch. Chapter 1125. Xiao Wanru turned around and saw that Qi Niyan's head had hit the door frame. She looked very painful and covered her head tightly with her hands. Her maid, Dong Shui, stood aside anxiously and said, Miss, how are you? Let me take a look at you. What's wrong? Xiao Wanru asked. My miss accidentally slipped and hit the door, Dong Shui explained in a hurry. Xiao Wanru looked down and saw that Xiao Yenru was leaning against the door with one of her legs slightly raised. Did you hurt your foot? I'm fine. I'm sorry to make Princess Chen worry. I'm fine. Qi Niyan said, still covering her forehead tightly with her hands. Her head was not covered tightly. Under her hands, the red and swollen skin was more eye-catching than her snow-white skin. She was a lady from a respectable family. She didn't shake her skirt when she stood, and she didn't show her teeth when she smiled. How was her behavior appropriate and magnanimous? Even if the Qin clan wasn't as prosperous as it used to be, they would still follow the rules of the past. It had only been a dozen years, so how could they forget such rules? This Miss Qin looked like a noble family and answered concubine Lan's questions freely. However, as soon as she arrived at Prince Chen's mansion, she behaved rudely, which was quite interesting. Help your Mississippi, Xiao Wanru said as she asked someone to invite Qi Ju over. Since she was injured, of course, she had to ask a doctor to treat her. At present, she hadn't figured out a place for Qi Niyan, so she followed Qi Ju to her courtyard for the time being. After they sat down in the courtyard, Xiao Wanru asked Nanny Yu to arrange a place for Miss Qin. Qin Yen didn't ask for much. She only said that she wanted some peace and quiet, so she asked Xiao Wanru to arrange a place in the corner. However, she hoped to be closer to Xiao Wanru's courtyard so that she could come to talk to Xiao Wanru, Princess Chen. She was trying to avoid arousing suspicion and get close to the hostess. Because of her attitude, Nanny Yu looked at Qin Yen with a kind expression. Nanny Yu's thoughts were very peaceful. Since Qin Wanru was Prince Chen's cousin, it was reasonable for her to live in Prince Chen's mansion. After all, the only elder of Qin Wanru's cousin was in the palace. She couldn't let an unmarried girl live in the palace all the time. Moreover, concubine Lan was in the limelight at the moment. It was said that concubine Lan was the emperor's favorite concubine. If Miss Qin lived there, it would be bad for her reputation. Nanny Yu was even more satisfied since this cousin seemed to be tactful. After she left the main courtyard, she directly went to pick a courtyard to make arrangements for her to stay in. When Qi Ju came over, he helped Qin Yen to take a look. Her forehead was not light and there was a big red bump. It looked scary. Her ankle was not serious and it was just a sprain. It would be fine after a few days of rest. After Qi Ju finished reading it, he left some ointment and left. Your Highness, Prince Chen is here. Yu Jia came in and reported while she was applying ointment for Qin Yen. While speaking, the little maid lifted the curtain and Chu Luchen, who was wearing a light black brocade robe with bamboo patterns, appeared at the door. There was an elegant smile on his handsome face and his eyes were slightly curved. It could be seen that he was in a good mood. Qin Yen, who was sitting in a chair and applying ointment, suddenly stood up and looked at Chu Luchen excitedly. Her lips trembled and she said softly, "Greetings, cousin." Her words were mixed with the "Greetings, Prince Chen" of the other maids in the room. There were so many maids that her words were mixed with others' words and couldn't be heard clearly at all. Chu Luchen waved his hand lightly and said, "No," without looking at her. Then he came to Xiao Wanru and sat down with her. "How is Imperial Grandmother?" "Imperial Grandmother is in good health and in good spirits. She should be fine after a period of rest," Xiao Wanru said with a smile. Qin Yen didn't know whether to stand or sit. She bit her lip, looked at Chu Luchen and Xiao Wanru, and slowly lowered her head, looking very pitiful. Xiao Wanru pulled Chu Luchen's sleeve, pointed at Qin Yen, and said, "Prince, concubine Lan asked me to bring her back. She said that she is your cousin and will temporarily live in our mansion for a period of time." A smile flashed across her watery eyes. She didn't believe that Chu Luchen didn't know about it. As soon as she brought her into Prince Chen's mansion, Chu Luchen must have got the news. This cousin was brought into the mansion by concubine Lan, and she even made such a big noise. In this case, she couldn't hide it even if she wanted to. Moreover, she didn't want to hide it. Her strategy was to introduce her to concubine Lan openly. Chu Luchen followed her finger and seemed to notice Qin Yen, so he turned his eyes. "Greetings, cousin." Qin Yen bowed sideways to Chu Luchen again. At this time, there were no other maids who bowed together, so she heard it very clearly. "Then she can stay here first. Has the courtyard been tidied up?" Chu Luchen asked casually. After glancing around, he turned his eyes back. He didn't care that there was a living person in the room, so he ignored her very much. "Nanny Yu is tidying up the courtyard," Xiao Wanru answered. "In this case, take her away to have a rest," Chu Luchen said lazily. But I'm afraid that it hasn't been tidied up," Xiao Wanru replied. "If it hasn't been tidied up, you can stay in the tidied up room first." Chu Luchen became a little impatient. Xiao Wanru winked at Chu Lu, who was standing aside, and said with a smile, "Your Highness, I'll ask someone to take my cousin to have a rest." Chu Lu came over and said to Qin Yen with a smile, "Cousin Miss, please. I'll take you to have a rest first." Looking at her cousin, who was not paying attention to her, Qin Yen nodded and followed Chu Lu to leave without saying anything, as if she had deliberately fallen and injured herself not because she wanted to see Chu Luchen. Why did you bring such a person here? Chu Luchen took Xiao Wanru's hand in dissatisfaction and said. I heard that the emperor also knows concubine Lan's intention. It's unreasonable not to let her live in the courtyard. Xiao Wanru knew that Chu Luchen didn't like concubine Lan to intervene in the affairs of Prince Chen's mansion, but concubine Chen really couldn't refuse this matter. Besides, it was the emperor's intention, so Prince Chen's mansion shouldn't and couldn't refuse it. She shook his wide sleeves and said with a little coquettishness, for my sake, just raise her in the backyard. This cousin seems to be tactful. Maybe it won't be so troublesome. After seeing Chu Luchen, she could leave so decisively. Even though she felt wronged, she didn't show her happiness as she did in concubine Lan's palace, nor did she show a coquettish look in front of Chu Luchen. This cousin seemed to be a wonderful person. Xiao Wanru suddenly became a little more interested. In the next few days, this cousin surprised Xiao Wanru even more, which was completely different from what she had said to concubine Lan. She almost never went out. Except for Xiao Wanru's place, she rarely went to the courtyard. She just did some needlework. She was very busy every day, but tried not to disturb the life of Prince Chen's mansion. The scene that Xiao Wanru had imagined didn't appear, and she didn't deliberately get close to Chu Luchen. She even tried not to do it when Chu Luchen was around. Because of this, she and Chu Luchen only met for the first time, and then they never met again. When she was in concubine Lan's palace, Miss Qi Niyan looked like a scheming girl with ulterior motives who wanted to step on her. However, when she came to Prince Chen's mansion, she behaved so well that Xiao Wanru couldn't believe it. The change was so great that Xiao Wanru felt that she had to wait for a while before making a conclusion. No one mentioned the abolition of the empress anymore. After it was overshadowed by Chu Liuchen's matter, the emperor seemed to have no intention of doing so. After that, it was gradually forgotten by everyone. The empress was still in the middle palace, but the power to manage the harem fell to concubine Da. Concubine Ming assisted her in managing the harem. The empress didn't care about anything for the time being, only saying that she was not feeling well and needed to take a good rest for a period of time. The debate about Chu Luchen in the previous dynasty also came to an end. The emperor admitted Chu Liuchen's status as the heir, but then he had to take a good test. As for the position of the crown prince in the East Palace, it was not established for the time being. The emperor was in the prime of his life, so he had to take time to examine it. As soon as Chu Liuchen's status was confirmed, he had the right to inherit the throne, just like the other princes. For a moment, some old ministers of the late emperor were very happy and satisfied. They had thought that Prince Chen had no hope and were sad, but now there was finally hope. Since then, there were 4 princes in the dynasty who could inherit the throne. At this time, the messenger of the Su state arrived outside the capital city. Chu Luchen returned to the messenger's team with his men, reorganized the crowd a little, and prepared to go to the capital city tomorrow. At night, Chu Luchen didn't go to the capital city, but stationed outside the city to rest. Master, Princess Yutao wants to see you. Xiao Xuanzi came in and reported with a smile. What is she doing here at this time? Let her go back, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Chu Luchen said lazily. Xiao Xuanzi answered and left, but after a while, there was a quarrel outside, which seemed to be getting louder and louder. Chu Luchen stood up unhappily and walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. He saw Master Yutao rushing in with 2 female guards, and Xiao Xuanzi chasing after them. He was angry and annoyed, but he couldn't really do anything to Princess Yutao. Princess Yutao was also his master's ally, so Xiao Xuanzi didn't want to make things too awkward. What does Prince Chen mean? He ran away secretly before, and now he doesn't even let me in at this time. Does he want to plot against the Su state? Seeing Chu Luchen in front of her, Princess Yutao stopped angrily. She was really angry, because she felt that Chu Luchen in the carriage in front of her was very strange. She wanted to ask him, but was stopped by someone. After all, this was the country of Dongtsang, and she was a guest, so she couldn't offend this seemingly ruthless Prince Chen. But just now, she knew that it was that damned eunuch who pretended to be Prince Chen and fooled them along the way. The real Prince Chen had already entered the capital city, and she was fooled like a fool. Princess Yutao was so angry that she couldn't help rushing in. Today, she must find Chu Luchen and ask him what he thought of their Su country. What do I mean? It seems that my intention is not as obvious as Princess Yutao rushing in like this. Chu Luchen smiled gently, but his eyes were cold. Under his gaze, Princess Yutao felt as if there was something cold and greasy sliding across her back, and the hair on her back stood up. What's wrong? Princess Yutao took 2 steps back, and looked at Chu Liuchen's handsome face with vigilance. People who suffered losses would always have a good memory. Chapter 11:26. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Princess Yuyan and Chu Qing hid behind a tree not far away and quietly watched Princess Yutao enter Chu Liuchen's courtyard. They couldn't help but show a proud smile on their faces. My good elder sister even wants to go back and fight with my elder brother for the throne. At this time, she is entangled with Prince Chen. Even if Prince Chen has married, so what? My elder sister can still be his concubine. She had sent someone to invite the other 2 accompanying ministers of the Su country. As long as they saw Princess Yutao enter Prince Chen's yard and not come out for a long time, it would be considered a success. As a princess of a kingdom, Princess Yutao was the one who asked her to be married off as a concubine. Who asked her to be with a man at a time like this? However, in the next moment, Princess Yu Yan's expression changed drastically. She suddenly grabbed Chu Qing's hand, and her surprised action also increased. Princess Yutao was thrown out. Yes, she was thrown out. In front of everyone, Princess Yutao was thrown 2 or 3 times before she managed to stabilize herself. Even so, she still had to take a few steps back to steady herself. Princess Yutao's skills weren't bad. If it was any other girl, they would have lost a layer of skin even if they didn't die. What does Prince Chen mean? With a livid face, Princess Yutao looked at Chu Luchen, who walked out of the yard step by step with a few guards. She stepped back and looked alert. What does Princess Yutao mean? You came here in a hurry at this time. Do you have anything to say? Chu Luchen stopped and asked with a gentle face. If not for the fact that Princess Yutao had been thrown out, she would have thought that Prince Chen was a gentle and elegant man. I do have something to say. After saying that, Princess Yutao angrily walked inside. Chu Luchen blocked her with the folding fan in his hand. Princess Yutao, please speak your mind. Here. Princess Yutao asked in astonishment. She looked to her left and right. Talking about something outside the courtyard? Everything can be said to others. Is it possible that Princess Yutao doesn't dare to say it in front of others? Chu Luchen asked lazily. Good. Princess Yutao was furious, but perhaps it was because of the pain from the fall, she didn't dare to take another step back. I'm here to ask you why you lied to us. You clearly returned to the capital first, but you hid it from us. What's the reason? Are you looking down on our Su nation? If that's the case, I'll take my second sister back and stop her from marrying Commandery Prince Qing. Princess Yutao said threateningly, raising her head high. Princess Yu Yan, who was behind the tree, suddenly had a bad feeling. She looked at Chu Qing and rushed out at the same time. Big sister. Even before Duchess Yu Yan arrived, her voice had already arrived. At the same time, Chu Luchen said leisurely, Princess Yu Yan and Commandery Prince Qing are already like this. Can Princess Yu Yan marry Prince Chen? I have something important to report. Seeing that the situation was not good, Chu Qing hurriedly shouted and interrupted Chu Luchen. How could he let Chu Luchen reveal the matter between him and Princess Yu Yan in front of so many people? There were still some things about their marriage that had not been properly discussed. Whether it was Princess Yu Yan or Chu Qing, they both had other ideas. Everyone wanted to cover up what had happened in the Su nation. Especially now that they had arrived at the capital. This was an even more crucial moment for the city. Second sister, why are you here? didn't you say that you were not feeling well and asked me to come alone to ask Prince Chen for an explanation? Princess Yu Tao turned to Princess Yu Yan behind her in surprise and asked in confusion. Princess Yu Yan was so angry that she secretly gritted her teeth. She had finally tricked Princess Yu Tao, but now she had to come to the rescue herself. She felt so aggrieved that she almost vomited blood. Big sister, I thought something was wrong, so I hurriedly came to find you. We are about to enter the capital of Dongsan Kingdom, and we can't let any gossip spread at this time. If you have to stay in Dongsan Kingdom because of this gossip, it will be my fault. Princess Yu Yan wiped the unnecessary sweat on her face and said with a flattering smile. Not far away, the other two messengers of the Su nation also appeared at the end of the road. They looked at Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yan and didn't understand what they meant at the moment. They carefully kept silent and observed the situation. The second princess said that the first princess and Prince Chen had an affair. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and now they were alone together. If Princess Yu Tao wanted to inherit the Su nation, she must marry a man of the Su nation in the future. She couldn't have anything to do with the Prince of Dongsan Kingdom. Otherwise, the Su nation might be destroyed. The two of them did not have high official positions. They were neither on the side of the first princess nor the side of the first prince. They were the real power figures in the most neutral side. At present, both the first princess and the first prince wanted to draw them to their side. This time, they were asked to send Princess Yu Yan to the marriage and assist Princess Yu Tao. Everything they saw would be sent to the emperor of the Su nation. They were the most loyal subordinates of the emperor, and the emperor would listen to their advice the most. It turns out that Princess Yu Yan asked the first princess to come here to ask this question. Princess Yu Yan and Commandery Prince Qing hid aside and eavesdropped. Chu Luchen was not so easy to talk to. Everything can be said by others. What I and Princess Yu Tao said can be said and asked together. Princess Yu Yan's face turned red, but she still insisted, Prince Chen, you are wrong. I just happened to meet Commandery Prince Qing. Commandery Prince Qing, what a coincidence. Are you outside my yard? Chu Luchen raised the corner of his mouth, and there was a hint of horror in his sarcastic smile. Chu Qing pulled himself together and said respectfully, Prince Chen, I just received the news that Prince Yu will come to pick up the messengers tomorrow. I come to discuss with Prince Chen about the matter of picking up the messengers tomorrow. This was to show that he really had something to do. Chu Luchen glanced at Chu Qing with an ambiguous meaning, and his smile became more and more treacherous. Then he flicked his sleeves gently and said, you can discuss this kind of thing with General Qin. I don't care about this kind of thing. After saying that, he ignored the people outside the yard and turned back. The guards followed him closely. When he walked to the front of the yard, he stood in front of the gate of the yard majestically and looked at them fiercely and vigilantly. Second sister, are you sure you're here to help me, and not to bring him, your future husband, to harm me? Princess Yu Tao sneered at Princess Yu Yan, her eyes cold. She didn't believe it at first, but after seeing Princess Yu Yan and Chu Qing appear, and two messengers with real power from the Su nation, she understood everything. It was obvious that they wanted her to die in the Dongsan nation and not let her go back to the Su nation to fight for the throne. Yu Yan had a good plan. What are you talking about, big sister? Princess Yu Yan argued. She was relieved that Chu Luchen had left. She had always been good at dealing with Princess Yu Tao. Anyway, she didn't have any evidence, so she didn't believe that Princess Yu Tao could really do anything to her. For so many years, she had been fighting with Princess Yu Tao. With the help of her mother, she had never been in a disadvantageous position. Slap! A heavy slap made Princess Yu Yan take 2 steps back. If Chu Qing hadn't pulled her, she would have fallen to the ground in embarrassment. Yu Tao, how dare you hit me? Princess Yu Yan covered her face with her hands and looked at Princess Yu Tao in disbelief. Even though Princess Yu Tao was strong in martial arts, she wouldn't hit her so rudely. Princess Yu Yan still had her brother and mother behind her. Princess Yu Yan, please understand your identity. You are the princess of the Su nation, a princess who came here to make peace. Even if you marry into the Dongsan nation, you still represent the face of the Su nation. Without the Su nation, you are nothing. Where should you side your heart? I hope you can see clearly that you will always be Princess Yuyan of the Su nation. Don't do anything that will make the Su nation lose face. Princess Yutao said fiercely. After scolding her, she turned around and strode away without looking at Princess Yutao, whose eyes were already full of tears. This was not the Su nation. There was no son born by the devil concubine, and there was no father who protected Yuyan. The two messengers of the Su nation looked at each other and nodded secretly. As the future successor of the Su nation, she should indeed prioritize the interests of the Su nation. Princess Yuyan was really too insensible. Seeing that she was so close to Commandery Prince Qing, could it be that she was really working for the interests of the Dongsan nation? In this case, the descendants of the first prince were not suitable. They would go back and write a secret decree to report to the emperor. Seeing that Princess Yutao had left, the two messengers also turned around and left. They did not care about the pitiful Princess Yuyan who wanted to say something. Wasn't there Princess Yuyan's future husband? What did they need them to do at this time? For this future husband, Princess Yuyan had even schemed against her own elder sister. The two messengers were very dissatisfied. Bitch, I will kill you. Princess Yuyan looked at Princess Yutao's figure with hatred. However, she knew that she could not defeat Princess Yutao at this time. She was filled with hatred and annoyance. At this time, she also understood that this was not the Su nation. Her reliance was useless here. She turned to look at Chu Qing and gnashed her teeth in hatred. Trash! After cursing, she stamped her feet with hatred, pushed Chu Qing away, and strode away. Since she was going to marry into the Dongsan nation, she did not want to marry Chu Qing, a trash. In front of so many people, she was beaten by Princess Yutao, but this trash did not say anything. In vain, her mother said that it was not bad for her to marry Chu Qing. At least their bloodlines were similar. They were pure royal bloodlines of the previous dynasty. What royal bloodlines of the previous dynasty? She was the bloodline of the honorable son-in-law, not the bloodline of the previous dynasty that had been destroyed long ago. She did not want to marry Chu Qing. She wanted to choose someone else to marry. Chu Luchen could not marry her, but there were others, right? She had already found out that those people had not married yet. She still had a chance, right? Chu Qing looked at Princess Yutao's back coldly. He did not want to marry this woman either, but he had a reason to marry her. In fact, at the beginning, he only conspired with her to scheme against Princess Yutao and Chu Luchen. He did not expect that he would be the one who was schemed against. He had his own princess, and he also had a reason to marry her. Chapter 1127. Xiao Wanru had long known that Princess Hechin of the Su state was going to the capital city. Hearing that it was very lively outside, Xiao Wanru had told Chu Luchen early that she would also go to see the fun. During this period of time, she had been staying in the mansion every day. She was also very bored. It was very peaceful in the mansion. What she had imagined did not happen. Having one more person in the mansion made her feel relieved. Although there were still people keeping an eye on her, they were not as strict as before. It seemed that Miss Qin Yen really did not want to become a concubine in Prince Chen's mansion. However, it had only been a few days, and they didn't have much contact with each other. Xiao Wanru really couldn't see through Miss Qin Yen's character. Anyway, Xiao Wanru was not in a hurry to let her live here peacefully. The wound on his arm was almost completely healed. He didn't move much, so he almost couldn't feel it. Xiao Wanru got up early in the morning and went out with Qing, and Yujie, the two maids. Instead of taking a large carriage, she just found an ordinary carriage. From the outside, only the sign of Prince Chen's mansion could be seen, and the rest was exactly the same as an ordinary carriage. Of course, a lot of thought had been put into the decorations inside. The carriage was covered with a soft carpet. Even if the road was a little bumpy, the people in the carriage would not feel uncomfortable. The master and the two servants boarded the carriage and headed for the city gate. It was said that there would be a welcoming ceremony at the city gate today. The private room was booked by Chu Luchen for her. It was just outside the city gate. It was a private room in a restaurant near the city gate. The location of this private room was very good. When Xiao Wanru came over, there were already a lot of people at the city gate. They were all misses and childs from aristocratic families who were rarely seen in the past. Everyone wanted to see the two princesses of the Su country. It was said that the two princesses were the most famous beauties in the Su country. They wondered whether they were better or worse than the beauties on their side. "Princess, is that Miss Zhang and Miss Luo over there?" Yu Jie was a sharp-eyed girl. She pointed at one of the carriages in the crowd. In the carriage in front, someone lifted the curtains to take a look. Before they reached the place, the road was blocked. Everyone moved very slowly, moving bit by bit. Many of the young ladies sitting on the seats were already secretly looking out. Some of the calmer ones let down their gauze curtains to take a look, while some of the more lively ones directly lifted the curtains. Today was such a lively day, so no one cared about these small impolite details. Xiao Wanru looked through the gauze curtain and nodded with a deeper look in her eyes. "Don't Miss Zhang and Miss Luo like to play with Princess the most? Why don't you ask the princess to come over with such an interesting thing?" Yu Jia asked subconsciously. After asking, she suddenly thought of something and hurriedly stopped talking. She stole a glance at her master and saw that Xiao Wanru's face was as calm as water, so she breathed a sigh of relief. She almost forgot what had happened in the imperial palace that day. At that time, it was obviously these two misses who were eavesdropping. In fact, Yu Jie didn't understand why these two ladies, who had such a good relationship with her master, would eavesdrop. Even if they eavesdropped, they didn't say anything serious. Why didn't they show up later? He inexplicably estranged himself from his princess. The carriage slowly moved forward and finally arrived at the restaurant where the private room was reserved. This restaurant was very lively today. Not only were the private rooms upstairs booked, but even the seats downstairs were full. Everyone was sitting there. The most discussed topic was the matter of the Su kingdom. Especially the two princesses, Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yan. It was said that Princess Yu Yan was here to marry Xiao Wanru, and Princess Yu Tao was here to send her sister off. These two princesses were very famous in the Mei kingdom. It was said that they were extremely beautiful. Now that everyone was here, it could be regarded as a good opportunity to see them. Xiao Wanru, wearing a curtain hat, entered the restaurant with two maids. As soon as she entered the door, a sharp-eyed waiter came to greet her. When he heard that she was in the private room upstairs, he became more attentive and led her upstairs step by step. The innermost private room was the big one. After the waiter led them in, Yu Jie ordered a few dishes and some light fruit wine from the waiter, and then asked the waiter to leave. Qing helped Xiao Wanru take off the curtain hat and opened the window for her. Looking out from this position, she had a particularly wide and clear view. It was still early, so the people of the Mei Kingdom had not come yet. Chu Luiyue had not sent anyone to pick them up. More carriages came over, and most of them got off at the nearby shops. Some entered the shops on the side and sat down to wait, while others just wandered around casually and waited. There were not so many seats for people to sit down, so they waited slowly. There was also a restaurant opposite this restaurant. Coincidentally, when they opened the window here, the window on the other side was also opened. Yu Jie ordered some dishes and came over to have a look. She recognized that the person in the private room across the street was Infanta Yuanpen. Yu Jie had seen the maids around Infanta Yuanpen before, so she could see them clearly at this time. "Your Highness, the person opposite is Infanta Yuanpen." Xiao Wanru sat in the chair and nodded indifferently. It was expected that Infanta Yuanpen and Zhang Qilan would come to watch the fun. "Your Highness, do you want to lower the curtain?" Qing turned around and asked. "No need." Xiao Wanru shook her head. Just like Infanta Yuanpen and Zhang Qilan could come to join in the fun, she also had a reason to come. Today was the day when Chu Luchen officially returned to the capital city, so she, as Princess Chen, should naturally come. Infanta Yuanhen, who seemed to have noticed Yujie at the opposite window, appeared at the window. She looked at Yujie with a very gentle expression, even with a trace of intention. Xiao Wanru also walked to the window. After bowing to each other, they looked at each other with a smile and then retreated. The dishes in the restaurant were good, and the fruit wine was very light. Xiao Wanru didn't drink in the past. It was Chu Luchen who recommended it to her, so she specially ordered some to taste and nodded after tasting it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Yujie was stunned for a moment. The waiter had just told her not to come over without any reason. The dishes had been served. Who was knocking at the door at this time? Go and have a look. Xiao Wanru put down the chopsticks in her hand, gently wiped the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said. Yujie obeyed and walked to the door. She opened the door and looked at the woman outside with a frown. May I ask if Princess Chen is here? The woman looked at Yujie and asked after bowing politely. No. Yujie closed the door impolitely and was about to close it. The woman pushed the door hard, suddenly knelt at the door, and said, Please let me see Princess Chen. I have something to tell Princess Chen. Let her come in. Yujie was about to drive her away. Hearing Xiao Wanru's voice behind her, she could only open the door and said coldly, Come in. She didn't like this woman at all. What did the mistress of Marquis Xing have to do with her princess? Why did she come to her princess again and again? The woman called Yi Inyang stood up and entered the private room. Yujie closed the door behind her. Seeing Xiao Wanru, Yi Inyang was very excited. After moving her lips twice, she suddenly knelt down and said, Greetings, fifth miss. After saying that, she burst into tears. She lowered her head and kowtowed to Xiao Wanru 3 times. Then she raised her head with tears all over her face. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Yi Inyang. Since she could find this place, it meant that she had been watching her. She should have guessed that she would come here today, so she deliberately waited in this area. There was the mark of Prince Chen's mansion on the carriage. If she looked carefully, she could indeed be watched. However, it was not an easy thing to see so many people coming and going in the carriages. No matter what you want, you don't have to come to me. I have nothing to do with the things of Marquis Xing's mansion, and I won't stop you. If you have the ability, you can do whatever you want. Xiao Wanru said calmly and raised her watery eyes with coldness. Fifth miss, I have a reason to come here. Yi Inyang reached into her bosom and took out a letter from her bosom. It looked like a letter. The yellowish color represented that it had been written for a long time. It was a letter that had been written for a long time. Fifth miss, I'm here to deliver a letter, not because Marquis Xing asked me to enter the mansion. It was inconvenient for me to say anything in front of Marquis that day, so I found Fifth Miss's mansion later. But later I heard that Fifth Miss was injured, so I couldn't enter Prince Chen's mansion. This time I heard that the princess of the Su state came to the capital city and was brought here by Prince Chen. I thought that Fifth Miss would definitely appear, so I stayed here and waited for Fifth Mississippi. Xiao Wanru didn't take it. She held the handkerchief tightly in her sleeves. Her face was still calm as if there was no fluctuation, but in fact, her palms were already sweaty. Her heart was beating so fast that she could hardly restrain herself. A letter. A letter. The title of servant, and the words that Yi Inyang asked someone to deliver when she came to see her in front of her mansion seemed to make her aware of a fact. However, was this true? Could what Xiao Jing's mistress said be true? What was the meaning of this letter? Who are you? After a long while, Xiao Wanru suppressed her excitement and asked slowly. Her eyes were as cold as ever, and her delicate little face was tense, showing a sense of dignity that other peers didn't have. Fifth Miss. Fifth Miss, do you really not remember Yi Inyang at all? When Fifth Miss was young, Yi Inyang often held Fifth Mississippi. At that time, Fifth Miss was still the first Miss, the only daughter of Infanta and heir of Duke Qinghua. Yi Inyang burst into tears. His words made Qing, and Yu Jie's faces change dramatically. They looked at each other and were so shocked that they almost couldn't believe it. Was this Yi, or actually the servant of the former heir of Marquis Xing and Infanta Qinghua? Qing had helped Xiao Wanru investigate the people at that time, and almost all of them had disappeared. It was said that something had happened in the war. Could it be possible that the girl in front of them was left after the war? If she was left by Xiao Jing, why did he take this girl named Yi Yang as his mistress? Could it be that it was not just because he liked this woman? Tell me, what's going on? Xiao Wanru said with a bit of coldness in her voice. Chapter 1128. Fifth Miss, I was Infanta's maid at that time. I left the capital city with Infanta and went to the border. I was also the one who escorted Infanta back to Duke Xing's mansion. After that, I saw heir of Duke Xing being born. Fifth Miss. I. Speaking of this, Yi Yang burst into tears. Yujie subconsciously looked at her master, only to find that although Xiao Wanru's face was calm, the corners of her mouth were trembling slightly. She became flustered because she had never seen her master lose control like this. There was only the sad cry of Yi Yang in the private room. As expected, it was something related to her parents. Why did you become second uncle's mistress? After a long while, Xiao Wanru said. Her voice was a little hoarser than before. It could be seen that this matter had a great impact on her. I was Infanta's maid and a member of the first branch. I came back with Infanta and had been serving her. Later, Infanta died. I wanted to follow heir of Duke Xing and serve him. Madame Jiang couldn't tolerate me and wanted to kill me. Marquis protected me and left. Since then, I have been with Marquis. Yi Yang said with tears. This was something that she had to do. Her master was gone and she was suspected by others. She had no choice but to rely on Xiao Jing and did not dare to return to Marquis Xing's mansion. That was why she said that she was Xiao Jing's mistress. What's the matter with this letter? Xiao Wanru said with her eyes falling on the letter in Yi Yang's hand. This letter is from Infanta to you and to Fifth Miss. Yi Yang pushed the letter in her hand forward and said with tears, at that time, Infanta knew that she couldn't do it. It was rare for her to sober up, so she wrote a letter to Fifth Mississippi. If she could find Miss, she would give it to you. If she couldn't, then, forget it. After I received the letter, the Commandery Princess passed away a few days later. I was taken away by the Marquis and the letter has been hidden with me. Even the Marquis didn't know about it. I'm a concubine and have been raised outside. I don't usually meet people, so I didn't know that Fifth Miss had been recognized. When I saw Fifth Miss that day, I heard from the Marquis that you had found her. Therefore, she didn't know about it. Then why didn't you tell Grandma that there was another me outside? You should know about General Qin, right? Xiao Wanru didn't take the letter, looked at Yi Yang coldly, and asked word by word. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, no one knew about her earliest existence. Except for Xiao Jing and the Jiang family, no one else knew about it. However, it turned out that there was another person who knew about it. How could she trust the woman in front of her? Even if this woman cried with all her heart, she would not believe it. In his previous life, there was also such a mistress. It should also be her, but he had never seen her send a word to him. She had never had anything to do with him. He didn't expect that she would be so deeply involved with him. When her mother was found, she was already crazy and mentally abnormal. The girl in front of her should be normal, but she didn't say anything. She hid everything from her mother that she had a daughter. I know. But at that time, the Commandery Princess didn't allow me to say it. Although the Commandery Princess was a little abnormal, occasionally when she was sober, she told me not to mention you for fear of your safety. At that time, Madame Jiang was valued by Madame Dowager. The Commandery Princess was no match for her in normal times, not to mention that at that time, the Commandery Princess didn't allow me to say it. It should be okay to say you were there. Yi Yang continued to cry. Fifth Miss, I'll listen to the princess. Since the princess said so, I'll do as she said. When the princess left with me, you and the former child were still fine. Later, the princess was sometimes clear-headed and sometimes confused. She said that you were protected by the former child, but she said that you were not safe even if you came back. She couldn't protect you. Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes to hide the killing intent at the bottom of her eyes. She showed up when she couldn't hide it anymore. Not only did this woman betray her master, but she also hooked up with Xiao Jing and Xiao Yanru long ago, and even had something to do with her parents' affairs. But now it was not the time to fall out with her. Xiao Wanru calmed down the bloodthirsty feeling in her heart and asked coldly, in this case, you followed second uncle. You are my mother's maid, so you will always be my mother's maid. It's not a big deal to follow second uncle. How can a brother-in-law marry his sister-in-law's maid? Fifth miss, I had no choice. I didn't have the power to protect myself at that time. Only Marquis was willing to protect me for the sake of child. Madame Jiang was cruel and merciless. I had no choice but to be forced out of the mansion. Since then, I have been protected by Marquis. Yi Nyang cried and said. No matter what Xiao Wanru asked, she could explain it. Xiao Wanru silently raised the corners of her mouth and restrained the inadvertent sarcasm on her lips. It was a perfect explanation, but it was too perfect, which made people feel it was unreal. Such a loyal maid had to become Xiao Jing's mistress in the end. All the sins were done by Madame of Jiang, and she was a loyal servant. Loyal servants were the most appreciated in aristocratic families. In such a situation, Xiao Wanru should stand on her side and trample on Madame of Jiang. What could be more humiliating to Madame of Jiang than to let her marry into the mansion as a co-wife? She appeared at a good time and had a better relationship with her. Even her maternal grandma might raise her to a higher level for the sake of her mother. In this case, it was not a big deal for her to become Marquis Xing's co-wife. After all, with the identity of Great Elder Princess, she could raise her status by recognizing an adopted daughter or daughter. So what if she was a concubine? As long as her status was high enough, everything could be settled. In an instant, Xiao Wanru had figured out the reason why Yi Nyang appeared here. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Xiao Wanru had to admit that the timing was good and the point was good. If she hadn't been reborn, she would probably have recognized her. There were so many helplessness. In fact, she had no choice but to come to this step. Taking the letter from Yi Nyang's hand, she almost couldn't lift it up. After calming down, she looked at it carefully. The letter was very old and there was no sign of opening it. It could be seen that it had been kept and no one had touched it. But so what? When it was written, Yi Nyang was reading it beside her. She must have known what was written in the letter clearly. It was even possible that she had instructed her mother to write it. After all, her mother was unconscious at that time. This letter must be written by her mother, but the content might not be true. Even though Xiao Wanru was very clear-minded, she still couldn't help feeling a lump in her throat. Her mother, the only daughter of Rui and Great Elder Princess, used to be such a proud woman, ended up like this. It was all caused by Marquis Xing's mansion. One day, she would dig out all the things that happened in the past and avenge her parents so that they could rest in peace. In the letter. What? I don't know. I don't dare to read it, and I don't dare to let anyone see it. This is the last writing of the Infanta. Yi Nyang wiped her tears and said. Xiao Wanru slowly tore open the letter and looked at the handwriting on it. The handwriting was very delicate, but it was a little uneven. From time to time, some words would jump out, which was a little incongruous with the whole letter. It didn't look like a normal letter. Zhuozhuo. The opening part was very clear. It was indeed written to her. Her heart was tugged hard, as if something had pierced her heart. This was a letter written by a mother to her daughter. She asked her to eat more and grow up well. She also asked her to live a good life with her father. In the future, their family would be reunited. At that time, her mother should have known her father's death, but in her delirious words, she still felt that her father was alive. After that, she talked about her servant girl Yi Nyang. She asked Xiao Wanru to take care of Yi Nyang if she had a chance to return to Marquis Xing's mansion when she grew up. She said that Yi Nyang was a loyal protector of her master. Without Yi Nyang, she couldn't have entered the capital city smoothly. She also said that Yi Nyang was a poor woman and followed her to repay her kindness. She talked about most of the things about her and a small part about Yi Nyang. Rui, and great elder princess, didn't mention anything about other people in the Marquis' mansion. She didn't even mention her younger brother in her belly, as if she just said it to her. After reading the letter and folding it, Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Yi Nyang again. I heard that before my father and mother left the capital city, they went to another place. Who did they go to see? Yi Nyang was stunned and hurriedly said, I don't know about it. Heir of Duke Xing went there alone. Later, I accompanied Infanta. However, heir of Duke Xing didn't go to the border at first. Later, he decided to go to the border. I think someone must have said something to heir of Duke Xing. However, I'm just a servant girl, so I don't know the details. You don't know that father took mother with him at that time? Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Let me think about it. It's been too long. I'm old, so I can't remember some things. Yi Nyang wiped the corners of her eyes, recalled for a moment, and said, at that time, it seemed that someone sent a letter first. After heir of Duke Xing read it, he left with Infanta and went to a courtyard. They didn't leave until evening. But I really don't know who heir of Duke Xing met and what he said to them. Xiao Wanru looked at Yi Nyang carefully. This matter didn't matter to them. What she said should be true. Someone made her father change his way. Then, before leaving the capital city, her father went to see another person. Who was this person? Who was the last person her father saw before leaving the capital city? She had a lot of guesses in her heart, but she really couldn't guess who this person was. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Wanru put away the letter, looked a little relaxed, and asked, in this case, do you want to follow me in the future or go back to Marquis Xing's mansion? I. Yi Nyang was very hesitant. After wiping her tears, she said, if I didn't have a daughter, I would naturally follow 5th Mississippi. But now I have a daughter. Speaking of this, Yi Nyang burst into tears. What she meant was very clear. With a daughter, of course, she had to live a good life with Xiao Jing. Entering Marquis Xing's mansion was the best way. Chapter 1129. The private room was very quiet, with only the sound of Yi Nyang crying. Xiao Wanru looked at her with watery eyes, which were quiet. Yi Nyang had been crying. Hearing the inexplicable silence in the private room, she panicked for a moment. She could only look up at Xiao Wanru and said sadly, 5th Miss, I know what happened to you. You can go back. Thank you for leaving my mother's letter to me. Xiao Wanru said. Get up first. Yujie reached out to help Yi Nyang up. No, Yi Nyang still wanted to say something, but was sent to the door by Yujie and Qing. You are Marquis Xing's mistress. If you continue to make trouble, our princess will go to Marquis Xing. When Yujie pushed Yi Nyang out of the door, she whispered in Yi Nyang's ear. This sentence immediately stopped Yi Nyang's idea of making a scene at the door. Looking at the tightly closed door, Nyang's heart turned 100 times. Finally, she wiped away her tears and stood at the door of the private room without crying or making a fuss. It was as if she was an ordinary servant, just waiting at the door for her master's call. Some masters brought a lot of servants with them, and there was also a guard outside the door. It was not abrupt for her to stand like this. In order to find her this time, Yi Nyang did not wear gorgeous clothes. Some capable servants of aristocratic families also wore the same clothes. She couldn't leave like this, but she couldn't upset Princess Chen inside. Princess, she is still outside the door. Yujie stood at the door and listened for a while. She didn't hear the footsteps of Yi Nyang leaving. Knowing that she was still there, she showed a trace of disgust on her face. She didn't like this woman called Yi Nyang. Piyujie didn't know whether it was because she had a preconceived idea or because she had so many things to do, but she just felt that this woman called Yi Nyang was not trustworthy. Fortunately, the princess didn't keep her. This woman didn't seem to be a good person. Pa's servant girl, she actually had a relationship with her master's brother-in-law. Many things could be said to be unpleasant, but it would ruin her master's reputation. P let her stay. Xiao Wanru slightly bit her cherry lips, and a trace of fierceness flashed across her eyes. P, do you want me to drive her away? She's standing at our door. I think she's a servant of our mansion. Qing didn't like her either, so she said grumpily. P, she just couldn't stand the seductive look of this eunuch. P, don't worry about her. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, it doesn't matter whether it is or not. Since she refuses to stop doing something and wants to attract others' attention and force me to do it, I also want others to suspect her and investigate Xiao Jing. She was the most loyal servant girl by her mother's side. She had always been protecting her mother. In a letter left by her mother, her loyalty was also mentioned. As her mother's daughter, she would definitely support such a servant girl. Moreover, her enemy was the Jiang family. No matter from which aspect, she should help Yi Nyang. But she didn't want to help. She wanted to see what Empress and Xiao Jing were going to do. She would never believe what this woman called Anyang said. These words were taken out of context. In fact, they did not tell the whole story. What she found out and what she guessed after her rebirth had always been in her mind. Because of Yan Shi's matter, she had confirmed part of the cause and effect. This time, no matter what Yi Nyang said, she would not believe it at will. She was more willing to believe the facts she found out and the facts she saw in the last life. In the last life, she was weak. But it was useless. This woman called Yi Nyang had never come to her. Later, she also entered Marquis Xing's mansion and angered Xiao Yenru in the imperial palace. But so what? She still entered the mansion safely and stood opposite to the Jiang family. In this life, she advanced step by step and got the help of Chu Luchen. Step by step, she got to where she was now, so Yi Nyang came to her. Another thing she didn't understand was that in the last life, there seemed to be no new miss in Marquis Xing's mansion. Even when she died, there were only a few misses in Marquis Xing's mansion. Where did this illegitimate daughter come from? In the last life, since Yi Nyang also entered Marquis Xing's mansion when the Jiang family was in power, it could be seen that this woman was not easy to deal with. Since she entered, how could her daughter not enter the mansion? Moreover, she was just a daughter. Even if the Jiang family didn't recognize an illegitimate son, they would recognize an illegitimate daughter. Moreover, the illegitimate daughter's mother entered the mansion above board. She was very concerned about this question in her mind. Was there something wrong with this illegitimate daughter? There was no such thing in the last life. In this life, because things had changed too much, there was such an illegitimate daughter. Was it the idea of Yi Nyang or Xiao Jing? There were thousands of conjectures in her mind, and it seemed that the truth was faintly coming to the surface. But when she thought about it carefully, she couldn't catch it or touch it. While she was thinking, there was suddenly a loud noise downstairs. Yujia looked at the window and hurriedly said, "Your Highness, Prince Yu has gone out of the city gate." Putting away the thousands of thoughts in her mind, Xiao Wanru walked to the window and looked out. Sure enough, she saw two groups of people coming out of the city. The people on both sides hurriedly got out of the way. The one in the front was the tall and handsome Chu Luyue. When they arrived at the city gate, the horses stopped, and the 2 rows of guards behind them also pulled the reins and stood still. Some people in the crowd on both sides unconsciously cheered. There were also women's excited voices, "Prince Yu! Prince Yu! Long live Prince Yu!" The sons of the Chu royal family were all very good-looking, and Chu Luyue was full of noble aura. When he stood at the city gate, he won the hearts of countless girls. Not only the young ladies of aristocratic families, but also some ordinary girls, with excitement and admiration in their eyes, looked at Prince Yu, who was riding on the horse. This prince was not only good-looking, but also likely to be the crown prince of the Eastern Palace in the future. Such an identity and appearance were indeed very attractive. The city gate was opened, and people came from the opposite side. The first carriage was a gorgeous one. The gauze was half hanging, and a man in black could be vaguely seen leaning lazily inside. There was a cloud pattern on his thick black clothes, and the dragon claws were looming. He was wearing the rough clothes of a prince, which were the same as Chu Liuyue's, but inexplicably different from Chu Liuyue's. He looked more natural and noble. When the gauze was slightly opened, an extremely handsome face immediately attracted everyone's attention. Chu Luchen rarely appeared in front of the public like this. Few civilians in the capital had seen this sick and weak Prince Chen. In the past, they only heard that Prince Chen was in poor health and seemed to be unable to walk. Was this really the Prince Chen who was dying? Wasn't he fine? Is it Prince Chen? It's Prince Chen. It's really Prince Chen. The crowd became noisy again. The two princesses of the Su kingdom all stopped. At this moment, everyone seemed to forget that they were originally here to see the beautiful princesses of the Su kingdom. They all went forward just to take a look at Prince Chen. Everyone who saw this secretly nodded their heads. This Prince Chen was obviously fine and nothing had happened to him. Looking at his imposing manner, even Prince Yu, who was the first prince, couldn't be compared to him. Why were there always people cursing him to die? The rumors of the royal family were really untrustworthy. Previously, there were rumors that Prince Chen had entered the palace long ago. It was said that in order to come back before the Empress Dowager's birthday, Prince Chen traveled thousands of miles and finally entered the city on the Empress Dowager's birthday. Not to mention other things, it was impossible for him not to have a strong body. It seemed that Prince Chen's body was really fine. At this moment, the person that everyone was most interested in and focused on was actually Prince Chen. This was something that no one had expected. The carriage behind, Princess Yu Yan's face turned livid with anger. In order to enter the capital today and give the whole capital a shocking image, Princess Yu Yan got up early in the morning and dressed up early. The purpose was to let people see her style. Moreover, the person who came to pick up today was Prince Yu. In order to prevent Princess Yu Tao from stealing her limelight, she even asked someone to find out Princess Yu Tao's attire early in the morning. After knowing that Princess Yu Tao's attire was not as outstanding as hers, she was relieved. But now she was angry. Princess Yu Tao didn't steal her limelight, but it was stolen by Chu Luchen. She felt very aggrieved. As a woman, she was actually not as good-looking as Chu Luchen. She had always denied this idea, but now she had to admit that this person had an enchanting face and was attracted to both men and women. The two parties met at the city gate. Chu Luyue jumped out of the carriage neatly, but Chu Luchen didn't get out of the carriage. He asked Qin Huayong and Chu Qing to hand over the documents of both parties and called the envoy of the Su country over. All the procedures were completed by them. Chu Luchen still didn't get out of the carriage, but didn't leave either. He just waited aside. He raised his beautiful eyes and happened to see the window where Xiao Wanru was. He raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Xiao Wanru naturally also saw Chu Luchen. His carriage was parked very well and happened to be facing the window. He lifted the gauze in front of him a little, and the two of them looked at each other silently. Chu Luchen opened his mouth and seemed to say something to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru smiled at him and nodded. Opposite the private room, Infanta Yuan looked at the smile on Xiao Wanru's face and then lowered her head to look outside the city gate. There were many people below, so she couldn't see who Xiao Wanru was smiling at. Could it be Prince Chen? Infanta Yuan inexplicably felt that it didn't seem like it. It couldn't be Prince Yu, could it? She turned her eyes to a place outside the crowd. It happened to be on her side, but not directly below her. From her position, she could see clearly that Zhang Qilan and Luo Xiaowan were standing together, surrounded by a few maids to prevent them from being disturbed by the surrounding crowd. Zhang Qilan raised her head and looked at the opposite window. Xiao Wanru was opposite her without a smile on her face. After looking at her for a while, she moved her eyes back and fell on Prince Yu in the crowd, seeming to be a little angry. Coincidentally, at this time, Prince Yu raised his head. No one knew who he was looking at. The anger on Zhang Qilan's face was obvious. She turned around and left, and Luo Xiaowan hurriedly chased after her. Pa's smile appeared on Infanta Yuan An's lips. She understood. What she said before worked. pp. End of this chapter. P. Crown Princess 49333 Dexelp. Chapter 1130. The handover ceremony was not long. After the two sides met and exchanged a few friendly words, they returned to the city together. The crowd retreated to the side and watched the carriages in front pass by and land on the two carriages behind. They were the two princesses of the Su kingdom. Under the light veil, the faces of Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yan were faintly discernible behind the veil, which made people feel that they were more and more beautiful. Two princesses are going to marry together? Someone asked in confusion. He had clearly heard that one of the princesses was going to marry. No way, I heard that there is only one. Another person replied. He had also heard the same thing. Who are they going to marry? Have you heard about it? A busybody asked in a low voice. They didn't care about how many princesses they were going to marry. What they cared about was who they were going to marry. Those princes all had their own wives. Even if they didn't officially marry them, they would marry them. Could it be Prince Xan? Someone asked. Except for Prince Xan, no prince was suitable. It's not necessarily Prince Xan's. The princesses who are going to marry each other are of noble status. They may also be other princes. At present, except for Prince Chen who is really married, the other princes are definitely not married. Someone raised a question, thinking that it was possible that they were not married. The princesses of Prince Chen and Prince Zhou are both extraordinary. It's not easy to get rid of them. Someone said disapprovingly. Watching the two princesses leave, there was a lot of discussion along the way. They were all guessing which family would marry the two princesses in the end. It seemed that they were not suitable for either family, but they were suitable for either family. Of course, some people said that the two princesses were concubines given by the Su kingdom to the emperor. If that was the case, it seemed to make sense. Almost everyone had guessed it, except for Chu Qing, who was in the carriages. As Chu Qing listened, his expression became more and more unsightly. Although he was not very willing to marry Princess Yu Yan, in the hearts of the common people, they did not take him seriously at all. After all, he was also the flesh and blood of the previous emperor, how could no one guess that it was him? Even when he passed by, they treated him as an ordinary person. All of this made Chu Qing extremely angry. He lowered his head and a trace of fierceness flashed across his eyes. One day, he would let everyone know who he was and he would trample on everyone. When the emissary from the Su kingdom entered the city, the onlookers naturally left as well. Everyone went back to what they were doing. Peace was restored at the city gate. Many guests from the private rooms came out and got on their horses or carriages. Xiao Wanru was not in a hurry to go back. At this time, she didn't want to join the crowd. Since she was out of the mansion, she wanted to take a good look and have fun. She had been locked up in the mansion for a long time and had wanted to go out for a long time. Now that there was such a good opportunity, how could she go back after taking a look? Princess, that woman is still here. Yujie walked to the door, peeked outside, and said in a low voice. Let her be. Xiao Wanru said calmly. Princess, she has been standing there for a long time. The guests in several private rooms saw it. When they left, they looked at us again and again. Just now, Qing secretly opened the door a crack so that she could see it more clearly. Princess, what does she want to do? Does she want to threaten you to help her enter Marquis Xing's mansion? Let her in. Xiao Wanru said lightly. Yes, I'll go and call her. Yujie answered, walked to the door, and pulled it hard. She looked at Yi and Yang, who had turned her head outside, and said, "Come in and talk about it. If there's nothing, you'd better not disturb our master." Yi Yang lowered her head and said, I have one more thing to ask of you, Your Highness." "Come in," Yu Jie said coldly. After saying that, she turned around and walked inside. Yi and Yang hesitated for a moment and followed Yu Jie in. "Your Highness." Seeing Xiao Wanru, Yi and Yang wanted to bow to her again, but Yu Jie reached out to stop her. "Just say what you want to say. If there's nothing else, I'll go back." Xiao Wanru stood up. Qing picked up the cloak on one side of the screen, put it on her, and took the curtain hat on one side. It seemed that she was going to put it on Xiao Wanru and was about to leave. "Your Highness, I want to ask you to help me enter Marquis Xing's mansion. After I enter Marquis Xing's mansion, I will definitely help you. I will do whatever you want me to do." Yi and Yang looked at Xiao Wanru with a pleading face, and tears fell down one by one. "Your Highness, I am indebted to Infanta. If it weren't for Infanta, I wouldn't have survived. Do you mean that you should continue to follow me? Or do you want me to do something for you?" "Yi and Yang, I can't help you now. If you can enter Marquis Xing's mansion, just do it." "I won't interfere," Xiao Wanru said. "Your Highness, when my daughter gets married, I will definitely repay your Highness's kindness and Infanta's kindness of saving my life back then." Yi and Yang looked at Xiao Wanru excitedly and said, "The past is the past. Mother, don't mention it anymore. Yi and Yang, although you used to be my servant, you have nothing to do with me now. If you want me to do something for you, don't think about it. Marquis Xing's mansion has little to do with me," Xiao Wanru said calmly again. "Your Highness, I'll kowtow to you again," Yi Yang said. After saying that, she pushed Yu Jie away, knelt down heavily, and kowtowed to Xiao Wanru 3 more times. Then she wiped away her tears, stood up, and used the previous title again. "Fifth Miss, I'm leaving." "Go ahead." Xiao Wanru nodded. Yi and Yang had no reason to pester her anymore. She wiped away her tears and left. She went out and wiped away her tears hard. At the door of the private room, she bowed to the people inside and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Her voice was not low, so everyone in the private room heard it clearly. Yu Jie's face changed dramatically. "Master, I'll go and have a look." She said such words in front of so many people. This girl called Yi and Yang had evil intentions. Although there were many people who left, there were still some people who didn't. There were not many princesses in the capital city, but there was only one who was as old as her master. This obviously pointed out that the person in the private room was her master. "It doesn't matter. Let her go." Xiao Wanru reached out to stop Yu Jie and shook her head. She listened carefully and heard Yi Nyang's footsteps leaving. Her eyes became deep. Did this girl have to have something to do with her? Others could not see that she refused Yi Nyang. What they saw was that Yi Nyang bowed to her respectfully. Xiao Jing wanted to make use of this woman, so did she. It was okay to drag her into this matter as long as she could find out what had happened in the past. The hatred of her parents was absolutely irreconcilable. Xiao Jing didn't seem to have much to do with her now. Now that Yi Nyang wanted to lean on her, she would let her lean on her. When she leaned on her, it was the same as giving her an excuse. At that time, he was also giving himself a reason. This person called Anyang was very suspicious. "Let's go and see Nanny Dong now." Xiao Wanru stopped thinking about Yi Anyang and stood up. The other thing she wanted to do when she went out today was to see Nanny Dong. At present, the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop had been solved. The news that Butterfly Clothing Shop was going to be under her name had been spread out, and only the final formalities were left. Xiao Wanru didn't care about the final formalities at first. She just needed to wait for Nanny Dong to deal with it. Unexpectedly, this matter was still stuck there. Nanny Dong had sent a message about this matter before. She happened to be free, so she went to have a look. When they arrived at Butterfly Clothing Shop, Nanny Dong welcomed Xiao Wanru into the account room, took out an official document from behind the desk, and handed it to her. "Your Highness, this matter is stuck." Xiao Wanru took the official document and looked at it. The big red seal on it showed that it was from the Ministry of Justice. She couldn't help frowning. It was related to the Ministry of Justice. Even if it was a trivial matter, it couldn't be ignored. As Princess Chen, she couldn't underestimate this kind of thing. In fact, the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop had always been Xiao Wanru. But at that time, she was young. When registering, she used Nanny Dong's name. She just borrowed it for a while. Both Nanny Dong and she knew that when they went to the bank to borrow money at that time, it was Xiao Wanru's own name, and when Shichi was the guarantor. If they investigated from these aspects, it was easy to find that Xiao Wanru was the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop. But judging from such a registration, it was reasonable to believe that Nanny Dong was the owner. "Your Highness, it is said that a fugitive has done something in our shop before. Before the matter is figured out, the owner of the shop can't be changed." Nanny Dong said with a face full of shame, "Your Highness, it's all my fault. You can't even put the shop under your name legitimately. Needless to say, someone must have played tricks in it. The most likely person was Wei Dehai, who had been coveting the shop." "Is there such a person?" Xiao Wanru asked after reading it. "There is such a person. At that time, he worked in the shop for a few months and then left. No one knows what happened to him later or how he got involved. Now Butterfly Clothing Shop is involved. Your Highness, before this matter is figured out, you really can't meddle in it. Otherwise, people will think that Prince Chen's mansion wants to meddle in it." Nanny Dong nodded and said. She really didn't expect that an ordinary shop assistant actually had something to do with the case of the Ministry of Justice. But it was true. At this time, transferring the shop to Princess Chen would bring trouble to Princess Chen. Princess Chen was in the teeth of the storm, so it was not easy for her to cause trouble. "Can you make an appointment with Wei Dehai?" Xiao Wanru thought for a while and asked. Nanny Dong was shocked and asked excitedly, Is it going to talk about the shop?" "Yes, let's do it tomorrow," Xiao Wanru said with deep eyes. She didn't want to delay the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop any longer. Although Wei Dehai was very important, the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop could be separated from him. Prince Chen's mansion was in the teeth of the storm. She had to deal with this matter decisively, lest Wei Dehai got her involved. She stood in front of the desk and wrote a letter. "Nanny Dong, send this letter to Third Young Master Wen of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion and tell him that I asked him to be a witness." When Shichi was a witness to what had happened back then. Chapter 1131. The two princesses of the Su Kingdom and their entourage didn't stay in the relay station. Instead, they had prepared a residence for them. Chu Luchen separated from the others at the city gate and went straight to Prince Chen's mansion. Chu Luiyue sat on the horse and looked at the direction where Chu Luchen left. He was lost in thought. Originally, he didn't take Chu Luchen as his opponent, but now he didn't dare to underestimate Chu Luchen. The second princess of the Su Kingdom was going to marry Chu Qing. Only then did he know that it had nothing to do with Chu Luchen. The news that came before was not accurate. It was said that Princess Yutao was going to marry into the Su Kingdom. Princess Yutao had a special relationship with Chu Luchen. Previously, he wanted to test his father's mind by letting Princess Yutao marry into the Su Kingdom, but now he didn't need to do that anymore. "Chu Luchen is not my father's son. Why can he inherit the throne like me? How can an uncle pass the throne to his nephew?" she thought. How can an uncle pass the throne to his nephew? It must be because father was forced to do so, he had no choice. There was also concubine Lan in the harem. Because she was Chu Liuchen's aunt, Chu Luchen now had a legitimate reason to inherit the throne. He really didn't believe that his father would be so selfless and really make such a decision. "Your Highness, our princess invites you in." A servant of the Su Kingdom walked out and said to Chu Luiyue, who was sitting on the horse, with a smile. Chu Luiyue got off the horse and followed the servant inside. The courtyard was very busy, and everyone was tidying up things. Only Princess Yu Yan was in the living room, which surprised Chu Luiyue. "Greetings, Your Highness Prince Yu." Princess Yu Yan rolled her watery eyes. When she saw Chu Luiyue come in, she stood up and saluted him. As the princess of a small country, she could not be rude to Chu Luiyue. Princess Yu Yan is too polite. When he got off the carriage just now, Chu Luiyue had already seen the faces of the two princesses clearly. He knew that the one in front of him was Princess Yu Yan, who was going to marry Chu Qing. The two of them sat down as host and guest. "Princess Yu Yan is sitting here. If you feel any discomfort, you can tell this king. This king will naturally have someone replace her," Chu Luiyue said with a slight smile. He took the task of welcoming the guests, so he was in charge of all the affairs of the Su country in the capital city. "Thank you, Your Highness. Yu Yan is far away from my homeland. I'm afraid I will have to trouble Your Highness in the future," Princess Yu Yan said softly. She slowly lowered her head and her eyes were slightly red. Marrying to another country, even if she was a princess of noble status, so what? The beauty in front of her was so outstanding, it really made one feel pity for her. "In fact, I will accept Princess if I marry him as a concubine if I marry him. If I marry Chu Qing, I would become a prince of Qing's wife. Princess, you have left your homeland and married to Dongsang country. Dongsang country can't treat you badly," Chu Luiyue said gently. The maid served tea and respectfully retreated to the side. "Your Highness Prince Yu, can you?" Princess Yu Yan's face turned red, making her look even more lovable. "Prince of Qing. Princess. Please, Princess, Chu said. "Kingdom, King. Commandery Prince Qing is in the Eastern Sung Kingdom." "Is he?" Princess Yu Yan's gaze wandered as she said this. She was very shy. She lowered her head and held the handkerchief in her hand. "Is Commandery Prince Qing unhappy?" "Commandery Prince Qing is my father's nephew. He is Prince Chen's brother. How can he be unhappy?" "Where did you hear that?" Chu Luiyue said in surprise. "Prince Yu, please forgive me. But Prince Chen and Commandery Prince Qing seem to be different. Aren't they brothers?" Princess Yu Yan said. Her eyes were red and her tears fell. She looked extremely weak. "My elder sister was supposed to marry him, but, it's me," Princess Yu Yan was moved. She wiped her tears with her handkerchief. Princess Yu Tao of the Su country was married to Princess Yu Yan. Chu Luiyue wanted to know the reason. He heard that Princess Yu Yan's mother was very favored by Emperor Yan. She was the second son of Emperor Yan, so she should marry Princess Yu Tao. However, Chu Luiyue didn't know why Princess Yu Yan was married to Prince Qing. "Princess Yu Yan, please say it. I also want to know the reason." Originally, Princess Yu Tao was married to Prince Qing, right? Chu Luiyue's voice became softer. He looked at Princess Yu Yan with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Princess Yu Yan had never received this kind of sympathy before. Even in the kingdom of Mengmeng, when such a thing happened, her imperial father did not even look at her. He directly arranged for her to be married to the kingdom of Eastern Song. Even her imperial mother's crying and pleading were useless. Princess Yu Yan was full of grievances when she thought of it. She really didn't want to marry Chu Qing before, and not now. In her eyes, Chu Qing was useless. She was also a beautiful woman. Why was she so unlucky? When she saw Chu Luiyue looking at her with gentle and caring eyes, she forgot to act and was overwhelmed with sadness. "My father was going to marry my elder sister, but later she schemed against me and Commandery Prince Qing, so I had to marry him." Princess Yu Yan covered her face with a handkerchief and cried. "Princess Yu Yan, don't cry. Commandery Prince Qing is also a good person. He will definitely treat you well in the future." Chu Luiyue took out a handkerchief from his bosom and handed it to her to comfort her. The two palace maids standing behind Princess Yu Yan looked down and didn't move at all. Good person. Apart from this, there was no other benefit. The more Princess Yu Yan thought about it, the more she felt wronged. In fact, Chu Qing's character was not good. Otherwise, he wouldn't have colluded with her at that time. Of course, she didn't think that her character was not good. She only thought that Chu Qing was not good. If she married such a person, what hope would she have for the rest of her life? Reaching out to take the handkerchief from Chu Liuyue's hand, she raised her tearful eyes and cried, "Actually, my request is very simple. I just want a husband who treats me sincerely, but Commandery Prince Qing has another woman in his heart. I heard that there is also a woman in the mansion who is a side concubine early." Because she cried so hard, her hand was a little trembling. She hooked her fingers with Chu Liuyue's, and their fingers overlapped. Chu Liuyue subconsciously reached out to touch her hand. Princess Yu Yan was so shy that she suddenly withdrew her hand. With a flushed face, she stood up and ran inside. She was so shy that she couldn't even speak. After bowing to Chu Liuyue, the two palace maids also chased after her. Chu Liuyue stood up with a smile and moved his fingers. The soft feeling just now was still between his fingers. It was very good. The women of the Su kingdom were really different from those of the Dongsan kingdom. They were bolder than those of the Dongsan kingdom. If she could volunteer to be a side concubine, it would be a lot of benefits for him. Of course, the premise was that she was willing. Otherwise, he would have to give up the position of princess to her. However, he couldn't bear to let Prime Minister Zhang go. The position of princess should be given to Prime Minister Zhang's daughter. Sitting together, it was a blessing to have Prime Minister Zhang as well as the backing of the Su kingdom. It was not bad. Before he met Princess Yu Yan, he didn't have this idea. At that time, he wholeheartedly schemed against Chu Luchen and wanted him to marry the princess of the Su kingdom as Princess Yu Yan so that he would never be able to inherit the throne. Now, seeing this charming and lovely Princess Yu Yan, Chu Liuyue had an idea. In fact, it was not bad to be a side concubine and enter Prince Yu's mansion. At most, he would not let her give birth to children in the future. Even if she gave birth to children, she would not pass the throne to him. The inheritance of the throne would not be left to a foreign tribe, and his father and the courtiers would not say anything. In a flash, Chu Liuyue had a new idea. Let Princess Yu Yan be a side concubine. This idea should be consensual. Princess Yu Yan was very dissatisfied with Chu Qing. Besides, Chu Liuyue was also very confident that it was better to be a side concubine than to marry Chu Qing and be a Princess Yu Yan. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt relieved. He turned around and left with a smile. He had to discuss with his aides about how to do it. Of course, it was better to let Wen Shiqi make the decision. As soon as he left the mansion, Chu Liuyue sent someone to invite Wen Shiqi to Prince Yu's mansion for a discussion. They had always been on good terms, so he was not afraid of gossip. When Chu Liuyue returned to Prince Yu's mansion, the guards sent to Prime Minister Wen's mansion came back and said that third young master Wen was not in the mansion but in Huaguang Temple. Chu Liuyue remembered that it was the first few days of the month, and Wen Shiqi often went to Huaguang Temple in these days, so he didn't think much about it. After returning to the mansion, he went to talk to his aides about this matter and discuss the feasibility of this matter, when Shiqi was really not in the mansion. He went to Huaguang Temple. At this time, he was sitting in the meditation room of the main temple of Huaguang Temple drinking tea. There was a chess game between them, but the chess pieces fell on the chess pieces. For a long time, there was no more chess pieces. "Master, I heard that you read my fortune for me when I was young. You said that I was destined to die prematurely and was so ill that I couldn't save myself. I had a belly full of knowledge, but I couldn't use it. I couldn't even protect my love and had to die miserably." When Shiqi put down the teacup in his hand, smiled slightly, and asked. This fortune was really ruthless, but he said it calmly, as if he was talking about someone else's life. There was no ripple in his handsome eyes when he raised them. "Master, did you make a mistake?" When Shiqi finally said calmly. Third young master 1, a person's life will not change most of the time, but it can't be said that it will absolutely not change. Sometimes a small change will not only affect a person's chess game, but also change the whole game. The abbot of Huaguang Temple looked up with a kind smile. He put a chess piece in his hand, which immediately changed the stalemate of the chess game. He reached out to pull his sleeve and said, "Third young master 1, please look." Wen Shiqi's eyes fell on the chess game. "Master, what kind of chess piece do you think will cause all the changes? Is it possible? If it's like what you said, can I start again in my previous life and this life?" He also picked up a chess piece and dropped it in his hand. He actually turned the game into a killing game, which immediately made the Huaguang Temple host's chess pieces weak. You have your fate in your previous life, and you have your fate in this life. You in your previous life and you in this life are different. Third young master 1, why do you cling to your previous life and this life? The abbot of Huaguang Temple did not put down another chess piece. He looked at Wen Shiqi without a trace of anger, put his palms together, and said, "Third young master 1, you are so smart. Don't you see it clearly?" Chapter 1132. Wen Shiqi raised his head and looked at the abbot of Huaguang Temple in front of him. He stopped beating around the bush and said bluntly, "Master, I think I saw the previous life, but the previous life is different from this life. The fate of the previous life is the same as what you said, but this life deviates from the fate of the previous life." His words were beyond Fei's imagination, but Wen Shiqi said it matter-of-factly without any hesitation, which showed that he was serious. The abbot of Huaguang Temple frowned and said, "Third young master 1, if there is a previous life, do you think the previous life or this life is better?" Wen Shiqi pursed his lips. In the previous life, he died of illness on the bed, but in this life, he could hold his head high. In this respect, of course, this life was better. But why did what he wanted in his heart almost have nothing to do with this life? He was unable to protect her in the previous life, but he could actually protect her in this life. But it seemed that it was a little too late. His heart seemed to be stabbed by something fiercely. "Master, the previous life has its sufferings, and this life has its sufferings. It's hard to tell which one is better," Wen Shiqi said with a bitter smile. He had no answer whether it was better or not. The abbot of Huaguang Temple looked at him, paused for a while, and then said slowly, "Third young master 1, you are obsessed." Wen Shiqi reached out to touch his head and said with a wry smile, "I am indeed obsessed." "Master, what do you mean?" "The previous life has passed, and it's hard to find it again. Although it's a pity that I have good karma in this life, I have no regrets," the abbot of Huaguang Temple said with a chuckle. His words were like the evening drum and morning bell. Wen Shiqi seemed to be awakened by something in his heart. He stood up and bowed deeply to the abbot of Huaguang Temple. "Thank you, master. This is the answer in your heart. You don't need to thank me." The abbot of Huaguang Temple also stood up and said with a smile. Wen Shiqi shook his head, nodded, and then said goodbye to the abbot. The abbot of Huaguang Temple walked him to the door of the meditation room and closed his legs. Wen Shiqi also turned back and bowed again. Then he turned and walked out of the meditation room. A servant had been waiting outside the door. Seeing Wen Shiqi coming out, he hurriedly followed him. Outside the mountain gate, they got on the carriage and went down the mountain. Wen Shiqi sat in the carriage with his head down. He was as calm as when he went up the mountain, but the servant felt a little different. It seemed that his young master had let go of something and became much more spirited, completely different from his previous decadence. The servant felt relieved. When he arrived at Prime Minister Wen's residence and alighted from the carriage, he saw a manservant running over with a letter in hand. Third young master Wen took a look at the letter, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. He waved the letter in his hand and said, "Reply that I'll be there tomorrow." "Yes, your servant will reply now." The manservant answered and retreated. Third cousin. A sweet voice came from the corridor on one side. Wen Shiqi frowned hard and then raised his head. His eyes fell on Gu Shishu, who ran a few steps with her skirt in her hand. Third cousin brother, I've been looking for you for a long time. Why did you only come back now? Gu Shishu was a little out of breath after running, and her towering breasts looked more attractive. She reached out to pull Wen Shiqi's sleeve. Wen Shiqi took a step back, avoided her hand, and said bluntly, "Cousin, we are not children anymore. It's necessary to guard against men and women." Gu Shishu's eyes turned red. Third cousin brother, you will always be the third cousin brother when we were young in my heart. We can play and talk together. After all, I've grown up now. Wen Shiqi looked at Gu Shishu unmoved and said, "So what? Aren't we cousins by blood?" Gu Shishu said with a little shame and annoyance. She reached out to pull Wen Shiqi's sleeve to kiss him again. "So what?" Wen Shiqi took another step back and said, "Cousin, if you have nothing to say, go back." After saying that, he ignored Gu Shishu, turned around and strode inside, leaving Gu Shishu looking at him with tears in her eyes. She looked extremely pitiful. After a few steps, they turned a corner and happened to meet second brother Wen Xian. Unfortunately, they almost bumped into each other. They both took a step back before they could stand firm. "Third brother, where did you come from? Why are you in such a hurry?" Wen Xian looked at Wen Shiqi and asked with a smile, but the smile looked very forced. However, his reaction was also very fast. When he first revealed his smile, it looked a little fake, but after a while, he looked sincere. "You came back from Huaguang Temple. Second brother, do you have something urgent to do?" Wen Shiqi stepped aside and let Wen Xian go first. "I'm fine. I just saw my cousin and wanted to talk to her. How come I can't see her in the blink of an eye?" Wen Xian said with a trace of malice in his eyes. In fact, he saw Gu Shishu talking to Wen Shiqi just now. Wen Shiqi knew that Gu Shishu was his woman, but he did not avoid arousing suspicion and deliberately pulled Gu Shishu. How could Wen Xian laugh? He was full of anger at Wen Shiqi. However, his younger brother had always been favored by his father and mother. If he really quarreled with him, his cousin might really marry Wen Shiqi in the end. How could Wen Xian be reconciled to this? They were supposed to discuss the marriage between his cousin and his cousin recently, but his cousin said that Wen Shiqi went to his uncle's place to please him and tried to show that he was a good match. As long as he thought of this, Wen Xian wished that Wen Shiqi was dead. When he was young, Wen Shiqi snatched toys from him. Now he even snatched his most beloved woman. Everyone in the mansion knew that Gu Shishu was his favorite. How could he have the cheek to oppose him? "My cousin was at the door just now. I don't know if she is there now. Second brother, go and look for her," Wen Shiqi said with a smile. "Okay, then I'll go first. I'll talk to you when I'm free." Wen Xian nodded and smiled kindly. Then, he walked to the door. Wen Shiqi continued to walk inside with a gentle smile, but there was a trace of deepness in his eyes. He would not let go of Wen Xian and Gu Shishu, even if this life was different from his previous life, he would not have any regrets. "What? Looking for me?" Wei Dahai was stunned for a moment and asked the servant in astonishment. "Yes, shopkeeper Dong wants you to go there tomorrow. She said that she wants to settle the matter of butterfly clothing shop." The servant nodded and said, What does she mean?" Wei Dahai turned to his wife, Ouyang, who was sitting beside him, and asked in confusion. He knew very well what kind of person Dong Mingyang was. Did she show weakness at this time? It didn't seem like something she would do. At that time, she would have taken the child in her belly and left. She wasn't at the end of her rope yet. Why would she show weakness? This was different from their previous plan. "Master, go and have a look tomorrow. Since she dares to do this, I dare to take people to make trouble. Where does the property of a mistress come from? Isn't it all old masters?" Ouyang sneered and put the teacup in her hand on the table. She glanced sideways at Wei Dahai and said, "I just don't know if you are willing to give it to me. Don't you know what I'm thinking?" We have been husband and wife for so many years, and we are of one heart and one mind. How can I still miss Dong Minyoung? Besides, she only gave birth to a daughter. Do I lack a daughter? Wei Dahai shook his hand and said indifferently. That's not necessarily true. I heard that she is the old lover that you have been thinking about for many years. Yang said in a mixed tone. Wei Dahai reached out to take her hand and comforted her. Madam, how have I treated you for so many years? Don't you know that? Only when you and I are one can we have a better future. At this time, I will not make a wrong step. I still know that thousands of miles of ant nest will be destroyed in one day. Hearing him say this, Yang snorted and the expression on her face became better. It's best that you think this way. Think about our plan. In the future, you will definitely become a great official. You are so knowledgeable, but you are only a small fourth-rank official. I really feel unfair for you. Hearing Yang Shi's words, Wei Dahai was very depressed. He sighed heavily and let go of Yang Shi's hand. This was indeed the most displeasing part of his heart. He believed himself to be talented, but because there was no one in the court, he had wasted his time until now. This was thanks to the help of his father-in-law. Otherwise, he didn't know where he would be now. But his father-in-law passed away early, so there was no one in the court. As for Nanny Wei, he found her later. He originally thought that after finding Nanny Wei, he could have a meteoric rise. He didn't expect that with just a little change, he would go from a powerless fourth-rank official to a fourth-rank official with real power. Thinking of this, Wei Dahai was a bit angry at Nanny Wei. She said that Nanny Wei was the favorite of the Empress Dowager, but she couldn't even help her own nephew. Master, don't be angry. There is a chance, and it is in front of us. It was good, but because of Chewy. Yang sighed and waved her hand with a headache. She said to the servant who reported the news, go and tell him that master will go tomorrow. Speaking of Mo Chewy, Wei Dahai also had a headache. Commandery Prince Qing was a good wife, but because of this princess from the Su kingdom, she became a concubine. Mo Chewy wanted to be the legal wife of Commandery Prince Qing for the future. If Commandery Prince Qing conquered the world in the future, the position of legal wife would be the position of empress. How could she give it up? However, Princess Yuyan was the princess of the Su kingdom, whose status was far higher than Mo Chewy's. Commandery Prince Qing's mother tried her best to protect Chewy. Besides, according to the news from Commandery Prince Qing's mansion, it seemed that the old princess of Commandery Prince Qing was also satisfied with Princess Yuyan and had no objection. She had no objection, but the Wei mansion had a very strong objection. They had planned for so long, but they got nothing in the end. How could they be reconciled? Therefore, Nanny Wei's shop became the most important thing. Even if they suffered a loss from Nanny Wei, the Wei mansion didn't intend to let it go. The most important thing at the moment was money, and Butterfly Clothing Shop was determined to get it. Okay, I'll go there tomorrow. You can come after you calculate the time. Seeing the servant leave, Wei Dahai gritted his teeth and said. He couldn't be defeated at this time. Let's think about it again. We must get Butterfly Clothing Shop in one fell swoop. Chapter 1133. Wei Dahai was very cautious. This cautiousness made him like a fish in water for so many years, and it also helped him escape several disasters. Therefore, he believed in his cautiousness very much. However, Madame Dong's previous incident had frustrated him. He had thought it was not a big deal. It was just a businessman, and it was a woman who was involved with him. Even if so many years had passed, so what? In the end, she had to obey his arrangements obediently. So he was careless, and the result of his carelessness was that he provoked Princess Chen. Wei Dahai didn't care about Princess Chen, who had just married Prince Chen. Prince Chen was famous for his short life. He wouldn't care much about a woman who was bound to be a widow. But he didn't expect that this matter not only involved him, but also punished his backer, Nanny Wei, so that Nanny Wei was very angry now. She had sent someone to reprimand him, and even knew that he had asked someone to pretend to be Dong Minyoung. Early in the morning, Wei Dahai appeared in the tea house opposite Butterfly Clothing Shop and asked for a private room, facing the shop of Butterfly Clothing Shop. From this position, he could see the people coming and going in Butterfly Clothing Shop. He sat there for the whole morning. This morning, Butterfly Clothing Shop was very peaceful. No abnormal people appeared. They all seemed to be ordinary customers. From time to time, a waiter would send them out with a smile. The flow of customers was very good. Most of the people coming and going were misses and madams from aristocratic families. After they came out, the servant girls held the objects in their hands and smiled. It could be seen that they were very satisfied with the things of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Wei Dahai estimated that the income of Butterfly Clothing Shop was a lot when he checked it in the morning. He became more and more eager. He needed money now. It was not good for him to accept Dong Mingyang's shop. Besides, if he married Dong Mingyang as his co-wife, Dong Mingyang would not suffer a loss, and he could treat her fairly. Thinking of this, she increasingly felt that her idea was right, and it was also good for Dong Mingyang. However, she didn't know why Dong Mingyang was bewitched by Princess Chen and wanted to sell the shop to Princess Chen wholeheartedly. However, he would not let Princess Chen succeed so easily. He deliberately investigated the Butterfly Clothing Shop. Before the matter was clear, the Butterfly Clothing Shop would not change its owner, so he still had a chance to get it. The key to this matter was Dong Mingyang. As long as Dong Mingyang changed her words, everything else could be discussed, and Princess Chen could not use her power to oppress others. Now that Prince Chen was powerful, people were afraid, but at the same time, Prince Chen's mansion was at the peak of the storm. At this time, it was best for Prince Chen's mansion to keep a low profile. From this point of view, Wei Dahai concluded that Princess Chen could not make trouble at this time, and did not dare to make trouble. If she ruined Prince Chen's plan, what benefits could she get as a woman? After thinking about this, Wei Dahai also relaxed. Then he ordered a few plates of snacks in the tea house and didn't go downstairs. He continued to keep an eye on them. He was very relieved that the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion didn't appear. It seemed that this was really Dong Mingyang's idea. Seeing that it was almost time, he pulled his clothes, stood up, and went downstairs with a trace of complacency on his face. In this case, the Butterfly Clothing Shop was in his pocket. If Dong Mingyang was sensible, she would consciously put the shop under his name. If she didn't, she would be his mistress if things got out of hand. Anyway, his official position was not high, and he was not in the top position in the capital city. Who would do such a trivial thing? If his wife and he were willing to accuse him, Dong Mingyang would not say anything even if she was in the wrong. Thinking of this, he became more and more sure. When Wei Dahai stepped into the door of Butterfly Clothing Shop, a shop assistant immediately saw him and greeted him with an unhappy look. He reluctantly cupped his hands to him and said, "Master Wei." All the people in Butterfly Clothing Shop knew Wei Dahai. They knew that Wei Dahai had schemed against their shopkeeper, so few of them would be nice to him. "Where's your shopkeeper?" Wei Dahai said indifferently. The worse the attitude of the shop assistant was, the more it meant that Dong Mingyang really had something to ask him. "The shopkeeper is in the accounting room." The shop assistant pointed to the accounting room in the corner. The accounting room on the top floor was much larger than the one upstairs. In the past, it was the main place where Madame Dong dealt with affairs. Wei Dahai waved his hand indifferently and said, "I'll go to Madame Dong myself." He didn't need the shop assistant to lead the way, so he took the servant there with him. When they arrived at the slightly closed door, he asked the servant to wait outside and walked in. The servant understood. After he entered, he closed the door and waited outside. Behind the wide desk, Madame Dong raised her head and looked at Wei Dahai coldly. Wei Dahai was not surprised by Madame Dong's attitude. He came in with a smile, sat on the chair opposite the desk, and leisurely put his hand on the desk. "Madame Dong, what can I do for you?" "Wei Dahai, you know the answer, don't you?" Madame Dong threw the account book on the table impolitely and said sternly, Wei Dahai, we have nothing to do with each other now, and this butterfly clothing shop has nothing to do with you. This shop now belongs to Princess Chen. Do you dare to do anything to Princess Chen? I don't dare to do anything to Princess Chen, but does your shop really belong to Princess Chen? Madame Dong, I know you have always been stubborn, but what's the benefit of being so stubborn? You've been deceived for nothing. Do you really think that everything will be fine if you rely on Princess Chen? Wei Dahai leaned back and said nonchalantly. He glanced around and found that there was no one else in the room except for Madame Dong. This was good. Of course, he had also calculated that there was no one else around Madame Dong. She was not a madam of an aristocratic family, so there was no one to serve her. At most, the shop assistants would come over occasionally. How could they stay by her side all the time? Behind the wide screen was the account book, so he couldn't help feeling excited. Did you do something to my shop? Madame Dong glared at Wei Dahai and said. Madame Dong, why do you always say that? What's the relationship between us? How could I do something to your shop? If you're not good, how can I be good? What happened in the past was really a misunderstanding. In fact, I wanted to marry you wholeheartedly. It was just a freak accident. Wei Dahai sighed, as if he didn't see the anger on Madame Dong's face. It could be said that the angrier Madame Dong was, the calmer Wei Dahai was. He even had a smile on his face and looked at Madame Dong with a little indulgence in his eyes, which almost made Madame Dong want to vomit. Such a man spoke as if he was a Casanova, as if she was the one who was fooling around. Taking a deep breath, Madame Dong calmed down the anger in her heart, and her eyes darkened. Wei Dahai, I don't care what you plan to do. I can tell you clearly that I don't like you at all now. Don't think that you can still deceive me like before. Now you. Speaking of this, Madame Dong looked at Wei Dahai with disdain and sneered. Madame Ouyang didn't give you money, did she? Look at how eager you are now. It can be seen how poor you are after marrying Madame Ouyang. It's almost the same as before. After all, you are a man who lives off a woman. I can understand why you are so eager to make money. For the sake of our friendship, I can give you some. As Madame Dong said this, she took out a piece of silver worth about 10 taels from her sleeve cuff and pushed it in front of Wei Dahai. She did not hide the sarcasm in her eyes. Wei Dahai, don't plot against me. If you really can't live on, just take this silver and leave. Don't bother me in the future. Our friendship is only worth this much. Looking at the silver on the table, even if Wei Dahai had a good temperament, he couldn't bear it anymore. He suddenly stood up, slammed the table hard, and said angrily, Madame Dong, what? Do you want to hit me because you failed to cheat me? Madame Dong also stood up, stared at Wei Dahai, and said loudly, you are a man who lives off a woman. What ability do you have to marry a co-wife? It's your wife who wants to marry a co-wife and wants money, isn't it? The words, living off a woman, made the blue veins on Wei Dahai's forehead stand out. This was the last thing he wanted to hear. It would remind him of when he was still a poor boy, especially now that it was Madame Dong who said it. No one knew that part of the past, except for Madame Dong. These words almost slapped him hard in the face. It seemed that he was in charge of everything in the mansion, but in fact, it had always been Madame Ouyang who was in charge. This kind of feeling of grievance was the weakness he cared about the most, and now it was unceremoniously torn apart by Madame Dong. Madame Dong, don't be so shameless. Wei Dahai was furious and said harshly. Madame Dong said coldly, Wei Dahai, do you really think you can defeat me? You brought the case of the Ministry of Justice to Butterfly Clothing Shop. You're really capable. Do you really think that Prince Chen's mansion can't do anything to you? Madame Dong said coldly. So what? If she has the ability, let her do it herself. Wei Dahai was so angry that he didn't care about hiding what had happened before. With a fierce look in his eyes, he stared at Madame Dong like a fighting cock. Originally, he had planned to take the gentle route when he came in, but Madame Dong made him so angry that he lost all his self-restraint for so many years. So it's true that you're the one who did it behind the scenes? Wei Dahai, how dare you do this to Prince Chen's mansion? Don't you think that you don't have the ability? No matter how uncomfortable Wei Dahai was, Madame Dong would say that. Even if they fell out with each other, she would not save him any face. Does the madam of your mansion know about this? Or is it her idea again? Wei Dahai, you're really promising. You even have to ask her about this kind of thing. Madame Dong had seen that woman before. It was also that woman who forced her to go to another place. Otherwise, not only would she die, but she would also lose the child in her belly. Madame Dong had always kept this matter firmly in her heart and never mentioned it to anyone. Now she tore it apart mercilessly. Chapter 1134. If you still want to follow him, then don't blame me for aborting the child in your belly. Our family doesn't need the birth of the eldest son of a concubine. What's more, we don't know if this bastard is real or not. If you want to follow young Master Wei, you can be a servant girl. You're just a lowly woman. How dare you dream of climbing the high branch? You're really shameless. All the obscenities were spewed out. At that time, the woman sat on the ground with her arms tightly around her belly. She looked helplessly and vigilantly at the crowd in front of her and the lady who was surrounded by them. It seemed that everything had happened again today. Although time had left a deep mark on the woman's face, Madame Dong still recognized the woman in front of her at a glance. It was Miss Ouyang. Madame Ouyang, who should be Madame Wei Dahai now. After so many years, it seemed that the scene of the past had reappeared. Husband, is this the mistress you've been looking for? A woman who has been raised outside for so long. Ouyang stood there and looked at Madame Dong contemptuously. The meaning of her words immediately made people understand that this was the so-called legal wife coming to catch the daughter of the mistress. Many people who came to watch the scene immediately became restless and looked at Madame Dong with contempt. What's the matter? Madame Dong asked. A mistress who was caught by the legal wife was a mistress. Looking at the man and the woman alone inside, needless to say, it was really the case. Madame Ouyang, right? Your husband is here to talk business. It's fine if Madame Ouyang doesn't know. But if she knows, she still says so. Isn't she afraid of being rebellious? Madame Dong snorted coldly. Now she was not the orphan girl who had nothing. In order to protect the child in her belly, she fled in the night. Rebellious? Madame Ouyang said coldly. She was the first branch who had all the glory now. She looked at Madame Dong with disdain. You're just a shopkeeper. How dare you say such a thing? Who gave you such courage? You and my husband were in a relationship, and my husband opened this shop for you. I know all these things now, and it's time to put an end to it. It turned out that this shop was opened by Wei Dahai for Madame Dong. Many people looked suspiciously from Wei Dahai's face to Madame Dong's face. Was it true? If not, what was the meaning of the two of them secretly meeting in private? Nonsense. When our shopkeeper opened this shop, she had never seen this Mr. Wei. A shop assistant who had worked here for a long time said angrily on behalf of Madame Dong. The shop assistant was also there when Madame Dong opened such a shop, so he knew about it. Husband, are you that interested in this woman? You took out all the money in the mansion to invest in her, and now you actually want to help her plot against me, the legal wife. Husband, if you really like her, just take her in. Why do you have to do this? Ouyang sure ignored the waiter and looked at Wei Dahai with tears in her eyes. The sadness in her eyes made people feel pity for her. In fact, if this was true, then Madame Ouyang was also a victim. Thinking of this, some people began to sympathize with Madame Ouyang. Madame Ouyang, food can be eaten indiscriminately, but words cannot be spoken indiscriminately. I don't know how Madame saw that I and Sir Wei weren't discussing business. Or could it be that Madame Ouyang came here to cause trouble? Before Wei, the matter of Darren plotting against my shop has yet to be resolved, but now Madame Ouyang is planning to not let it go. Madame Dong said calmly. She's just an outsider. What business is there to talk about? They're talking business behind closed doors. How can a man and a woman talk business alone? Sex business? A few people in the crowd ridiculed. Their words were extremely unpleasant to hear. Madam. I really like Madam Ming, we already have a daughter. The anger on Wei Dehai's face had disappeared, revealing a look of bewilderment. Stamp his foot, his feet seemed to have been forced into a corner. As soon as these words came out, it immediately confirmed that there was indeed a relationship between the two of them, and they even had a daughter. If this wasn't keeping a mistress, then what was? Those who had been hesitating whether or not they were wrong immediately stood on the Ouyang clan's side. She really is a lowly person. She has already given birth to a daughter, but she still doesn't acknowledge it. She doesn't want such a woman even if she is sent to the door. Now she even dares to talk back to the legal wife. Although she knew that Wei Dehai was shameless, she didn't expect him to be so shameless. Madame Dong was angry and hateful, but she didn't say anything and stepped back. A neatly dressed servant girl came out from behind the wide screen. Her appearance stunned everyone. Didn't they say that there were only a man and a woman talking business in the room? How could there be other people? Wei Dehai's eyes immediately narrowed. He had been in the room for so long, but he didn't find anyone behind the screen. Master Wei, our master was talking with Madame Dong before. Master Wei rushed in, so our master avoided him. Now she can be regarded as a witness. She glanced at Wei Dehai and Ouyang and said, our master said that Madame Dong can report this matter to the authorities. Madame Dong is Lord Wei's first wife, and she was separated by you too. Do you want to force her to marry you again? Ouyang Wei's face darkened. Her words immediately explained that there was a child between Madame Dong and Wei Dehai. It turned out that Madame Dong was not a mistress, but the first wife. The current legal wife was the source of the disaster that broke up the family. The people who had been pointing fingers at Madame Dong immediately turned to Madame Ouyang. This was a marketplace, and some words were certainly not pleasant to hear. Madame Ouyang's face turned red with anger. Today, she and Wei Dehai planned to catch the adulterer and force Madame Dong to agree to enter the Wei's mansion. Unexpectedly, the master who suddenly appeared at the moment was also in the room. Not only was she in the room, but she also explained the grievances between them and Madame Dong in a few words. At this moment, people with discerning eyes immediately understood what was going on. What kind of person is your master? Sneaking around and stealing, what's the meaning of this? Madame Ouyang was furious. She pointed her finger at Yu Jie. Madam, you'd better not know who our master is. As for sneaking around, Master Wei just rushed in. What's wrong with our master avoiding him? I just didn't expect to hear such a wonderful scene. Forcing a good woman to be a concubine, Master Wei is really wonderful. I just heard that Master Wei lives off a woman. Now I see Madame Ouyang, he really deserves to be a woman's husband. Yu Jie was the most unforgiving person with her mouth. At this time, she did not intend to spare Madame Ouyang. She sneered and replied. How dare you? Madame Ouyang had never been said to her face like this. She was a maid. She was so angry that she took a step forward and was about to slap Yu Jie in the face. Wei Dehai's face darkened. He glared at Yu Jie angrily. He hated people who lived off a woman the most. He was so angry that his face turned livid and the corners of his mouth twitched. He could not say a word. Yu Jie took a step back to avoid Madame Ouyang's hand. She suddenly smiled and said, Master Wei and Madame Wei, do you mean that this shop originally belonged to your family? Coincidentally, Madame Dong happens to have a witness here who can prove that this shop has nothing to do with your family. It hasn't been long since you found Madame Dong. In order to get this shop, you will do anything. You too, please. The officials of the Ministry of Justice will come later. Unexpectedly, the officials of the Ministry of Justice intervened. Wei Dahai and Madame Ouyang looked at each other and immediately knew that something bad had happened. Wei Dahai himself did not have much power. Some things were done in a roundabout way, and even the people who did it did not know that he was in charge. Master, how do you explain this? What did you tell me? For this woman, you actually lied to me like this? Madame Ouyang reacted quickly. She immediately turned to Wei Dahai. Her lips trembled, and 2 lines of tears fell down. She meant that she did not know anything and was deceived by Wei Dahai. Madam. I really want to marry Madam Ming. At that time, we separated because of a misunderstanding. I was afraid that Madam would not allow it, so I had to say that to you. Wei Dahai cooperated very well. He immediately became sad and looked at Madame Ouyang with a sad face. This made the onlookers confused again. They looked at one person and then at the other. Finally, their eyes fell on the face of Madame Dong, who seemed to be an outsider at this time. She also looked calm, as if the couple were talking about someone else. You two, please. Our master is waiting for you inside. This matter has to be explained clearly, so as not to make such a thing happen again. Yu Jie gave way to the side and looked at the couple with a faint smile. Master, this matter, you see. I don't care. Madame Ouyang seemed to be extremely sad. She waved her sleeves and was about to leave in tears. However, when she turned around, she found that there were people behind her. There were 2 old maids standing behind her. Madam Wei, please. Our master will help you explain today. Even if our master can't explain clearly, there is still the Ministry of Justice, right? Don't worry. The Ministry of Justice has always been impartial and will not make things difficult for you. Yu Jie looked at Madame Ouyang with a smile and said. The 2 old maids behind her pressed forward impolitely. Although the Wei's mansion also brought old maids, they were obviously less imposing than these 2 old maids. In addition, Madame Ouyang did not dare to really make a move at this time. She didn't know who the master inside was. Wei Dahai's official position was too low, and there were too many people in the capital city who were higher than him. If they really made trouble, she was afraid that something bad would happen. Madame Ouyang had to retreat into the room. Watching the door being slammed shut, she turned around and looked at Yu Jie with a relaxed face. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and looked at Yu Jie. I really didn't know about this. After so many years, my husband still hasn't forgotten his love. If I knew, I would never let him come to this butterfly clothing shop. She insisted that she didn't know and was deceived by Wei Dahai. Then, she said that Wei Dahai really loved Madame Dong. This was what they had discussed before. They were afraid that something unexpected would happen. At this time, it was just the right time to use it.